Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Harry found he could make great time running through the grounds. All the magic being cast at the wards was causing them to sparkle as if they were a physical entity. It easily provided enough light for him to be sure-footed, even in an all-out run. His right arm was across his chest, his hand on the hilt of his sword to stop it swinging as he ran. This was also the arm that had a kestrel perched on it. Hermione was tight against his chest and staying as still as possible to help Harry preserve his balance. Both were glad the Bones' residence was in Norfolk and not the Scottish Highlands. This move would have been impossible to attempt with snow on the ground. They reached a small banking with some bushes for cover about 30 yards from the attacking Death Eater's position. Here they would wait and see what developed. With only 4 not wearing masks, Lestrange was easily spotted. Pictures of Rookwood had also been splashed everywhere, meaning they quickly recognized him too. They surmised that the other 2 would be Riddle and Pettigrew. Since one was a wee fat balding man who appeared to have all the charisma of Tapioca, they focused their attention on the tall figure who was pouring magic into the wards. The kestrel slowly became Hermione. She had her back tied to Harry's chest, and the cloak still covered both of them. The couple had shrunken goblin shields attached to their scabbards. These were removed and twisted to their fighting size, while their weapons were made ready for battle. Harry was whispering instructions in her ear. "Whatever happens, I want you to stay here. This should give you some shelter and still allow you to provide covering fire." "And where will you be?" "That will depend on where the warriors appear. I might be right here beside you." Both heard someone approaching. The direction and the fact they were invisible meant that it would almost certainly be support for them. Hearing someone grumbling under their breath as they stumbled provided the needed clue. "Tonks?" The whispering of her name caused the Auror to stop. She couldn't see them but had headed for the place that provided the most cover. "Harry, where are you?" Hermione's hands slipping out of their cloak for a second gave Tonks a location to focus on. She never got to say anything more before the wards spectacularly crashed. The magic falling from the sky would soon make their cloaks a liability. The squad of goblin warriors appearing in just about the worst place possible made that fact irrelevant. Harry had already picked his target. The cloak was whipped off as the sword of Gryffindor was brought into the battle. He put everything he had into the spell and let go. "Warriors to me, warriors to me." The Golden Centurion was out of the depression and racing to intercept the warriors' path as they all charged the Death Eaters. Hermione and Tonks, though, had shot up to follow Harry. All 3 were now pouring their most powerful spells into the group of shocked Death Eaters. Bella watched in disbelief as the Golden Wizard appeared from nowhere. A spell left his sword and whizzed past her. Her weakened master barely had time to raise a shield before the powerful spell hit. The shield never really had a chance, and the Dark Lord was blasted tumbling through the air to land somewhere deeper into the woods. They were coming under heavy fire, and then the volume of spells suddenly increased. Bella instantly made her decision. "Wormtail, lead the attack on the house. I'm going to see how our master is." Peter was not a brave wizard. The arrival of more wizards, though, had him thinking that attacking the inside of the house might be the safer option. Spotting Sirius and then Remus as part of the new group of attackers certainly made his mind up. "Group 1, let's move, now." The rest of the group had obviously reached the same conclusion as Peter and quickly disapparated away too. Rookwood realized they'd just made a huge tactical error. With their master down and Bella determined to check on him, they had just lost their 2 most powerful fighters from this battle. To then split their remaining force in half while they were being attacked wasn't just crazy, it was suicidal. These Death Eaters were neither trained warriors nor powerful witches and wizards. They probably spent most of their lives having everything done for them by servants. The power and accuracy of the spells they were facing were also different to anything Death Eaters had faced before. These were no mere stunners that were coming at them. These people were playing for keeps. They were also still charging as they fired, and those goblin blades were getting closer and closer. If they reached amongst them, then there would be no quarter given. The immediate problem was Rookwood couldn't see any way of stopping them. He shot off after his mate and their master. Both needed to get back into the fight immediately, or they all needed to leave even sooner than that. The warriors charged forward on the heels of Centurion Crow, their formation opening and then closing around his charging mate and the aura with the funny hair. Both, like the Centurion, were still firing off spells, but now had warriors shielding them until they reached their targets. A big dog shimmered into being running alongside the squad before it transformed into Lord Black, and he too was forcing their enemy to keep their heads down. A volley of curses coming from behind them caused a spike of panic until those curses sailed over their heads and began smashing into the tree line. It was now grinning goblins who were almost on top of their foe. All had recognized at once the danger they were in. An entrenched enemy with a massive reach advantage could have seen them slaughtered before being able to bring their blades to bear. Instead, the Centurion and his friends had turned the once desperate situation into a rout in their favor. Centurion Crow's actions had undoubtedly saved all their lives, and their honor demanded that no harm would touch his mate while one of them still lived. Hermione was currently firing curses over a plethora of goblin shields, all done while still on the run toward their enemy. With a terrifying goblin yell, Harry reached their foe. The warriors were only a few yards behind the charging Centurion, and yelling too. His first swing with that fabled sword took an arm clean off and broke any remaining resolve. A lucky few managed to disapparate before they were overrun. Those that didn't would never be running again. Augustus knew at once what their decision would have to be. Their master was unconscious and bleeding from his nose, mouth, and ears. His left leg was also bent in ways that were impossible for a structure, supposedly supported by bone. "Bella, I need you to apparate our master out of here. I'm going to cut out the entrails of whoever did this and make him eat them while they're still attached. And I'll help you. Tonight is not the time for that, though. In minutes we'll be overrun, and then our master will be captured. We know he has no more Horcruxes. If they kill him, then he's dead this time. I know you want to fight, but I don't have the power to apparate our master and me to the Forest of Dean. I barely have enough energy to make the trip myself." Bella knew her mate spoke the truth. Her instinct to fight, though, was strong. That golden thing with the sword, that was Potter. "I think so." If there was one thing Bella could recognize, it was a killer. They had thought they were dealing with a boy and were oh so wrong. He had led the attack on their position and fought like a demon. She also knew Augustus would fight to the death to protect her and their master, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. She would not have Potter kill her master. Bella firmly took their master's arm and then they were gone. Augustus heard the screams behind him and knew it was past time to get out of here. His last thought was that if Peter got caught, then their safe place would be gone too. They would need to move in a hurry. The battle was swiftly over, and Harry called on the warriors to secure a perimeter when he was attacked. He certainly didn't need any help, though, something the warriors recognized by cheering and banging on their shields. Hermione had her arms, legs, and lips locked on her Centurion as another page was added to the legend they were becoming. The nation had taken the warrior princess to their hearts. Harry was currently trying to have a heart-to-heart with his mate. He was still supporting her weight, and their foreheads were now resting against each other. "I distinctly remember telling you to stay where you were and to provide covering fire from there. Instead, you charged this position like a maniac." "I was following my maniac of a mate. I saw that first green curse head toward you and was moving before I knew it. I can now say for certain our shields will protect us from a killing curse. We knew it would destroy the shield, but the force still nearly broke my arm. I saw 3 of them heading straight for you at the same time." "Yeah, managed to dodge 2 but had to take the 3rd on my shield, not something I want to do again." Then the reinforcements arrived. Their hug was reinforced as Neville and a tearful Padma slammed into the couple. "You two scared the bloody life out of us. We came as quick as we could. We're a team, remember?" "Sorry, Padma, I didn't even want to take Hermione, but she left me with no choice." "When did you complete your transformation? You kept that quiet." "Yesterday, Neville. I just never got a chance tonight to tell you both. I guess the secret is out now anyway. That's only the 3rd time I've managed it, which is why I was on Harry's arm rather than flying. The weather in King of Sea has been too bad for flying the last few days anyway. Harry spotted his godfather checking the bodies and broke the bad news. Serious? I heard Lestrange yelling for Wormtail to lead the attack on the house. They'll get him Sirius. Sirius was no longer there. At least he had the sense not to apparate to a house expecting to be attacked in that manner. Padfoot was once again racing across the grass as fast as his paws would carry him. With the wards now down and the battle over, darkness had once more laid claim to this part of the countryside. The warriors were lighting torches while the rest of the group were making sure those Death Eaters, still alive, wouldn't be going anywhere or harming anyone else. It was into this scene Amelia's signal for help was answered. Tonks took charge at once before there could be any accidents involving the arriving auras. Aura Tonks on site and the scene is secure. Stand down. I need about 6 of you to help with the wounded and the bodies. None of them are from our side. The rest go up to the house and see if the boss needs any help. Do not parry to the house, they were expecting to be attacked in that manner, so make sure you announce yourselves. Tell her we have a problem, what to do with the wounded and dead Death Eaters. We can't send them to St. Mungo's or the Ministry because of their dark marks. The aura in charge quickly shouted 6 names to stay behind before racing straight for the house. Barchoke had a flaming torch in his hand, while Bill's wand was lit as they approached the huddle containing 4 teenagers. Okay, you lot, what did we do wrong? I ruined a perfectly good dress that was a Christmas present. I never even got a chance to dance in it. From Hermione's flippant opening answer to their tutor's normal question, it soon got a lot more serious. I took a killing curse on my shield instead of diving to the ground. If the attack had stalled, we would have lost. I took a calculated gamble and got lucky. Neville was next with an honest answer. I found it a lot harder to run, dodge and accurately return fire in a real fight rather than our simulations. We were firing the heaviest curses we knew, but some of the stuff coming back at us, I thought Moody was making up. What would possess someone to fire off an entrail-expelling curse? His mate, though, had thought of a worse problem. None of us asked our parents for permission. There wasn't time, we just ran out of there and now we'll be in so much shit. Barchoke easily recognized the signs. In battle, adrenaline will keep you going and ignoring annoying things like cuts, bruises or even wounds. After the battle you are so euphoric at surviving that you can forget your actions and even forget your surroundings. As all that bleeds from your system though and reality striking can be a right bastard. The reality was these 4 were standing at the edge of a wood, surrounded by death and destruction. The cries in the night were not those of owls or foxes, rather the cries for help from the injured. That these 4 accounted for some of that death and destruction was unquestionable, something that was beginning to hit home to the teenagers. I think we better get them back to the house. Sirius will have told everyone they're okay by now, but I know some ladies who will want to see that for themselves. Barchoke then found himself being enveloped in his daughter's arms. She refused to let go and Harry was then at his other side, his arm around his father's shoulders. The goblin walked from the battlefield, a child at each side. Both of those children may have towered over him, but Barchoke was so proud of them he felt 10 feet tall. Padma and Neville followed with Bill beside them. Do you think everyone at the house will be all right? Padma, here we were attacking a position the Death Eaters held. That made it so much harder for us. In the house, Amelia will have everyone in a defendable position, and they won't be holding back. There are multiple wands, 3 pistols, Dan's shotgun, and don't forget the 2 Vela, with children and pregnant woman in that house. They'll hit them with everything they have. Those Death Eaters have no idea what they've let themselves in for. Bill just hoped he was right. With no more than a basic idea of the house layout, they apparated into the entrance hall with wands drawn. The noise that made had obviously alerted those in the house of their arrival. They could hear talking and some crying behind a set of double doors. Peter liked the idea of being in command. He also liked the idea of not having spells flying all around him. On 3, 1, 2. They blasted the doors apart and charged through the smoke and dust with deadly curses, spitting from their wands. Amelia had the defenders drag the heavy tables onto their sides, disregarding all the food Susan had spent hours deciding on. The 3 tables were then placed end to end, with the wall at their back to form a protective fort. Astoria and Pauline were the youngest present, so got placed right at the back where Luna was keeping an eye on them. Everyone else was ready, willing and able to fight. As soon as they were set, all the lights were killed, and then they had waited in the darkness. When the doors blew in, not only were their attackers backlit, they were bunched and firing blindly, the spell flashes further giving their position away. The amount of magic, bullets and even fireballs that headed in the Death Eater's direction meant the fight was over in seconds. It wasn't really a fight, it actually needed reclassifying as a slaughter. Peter was lying on the ground covered in blood, none of which was actually his. They had charged into a torrent of magic and the wizard in front of him had been hurled back, throwing Peter to the ground. This was certainly the only reason Peter was still alive. But that wouldn't last for long if he didn't get out of here. There was now more than one body pinning him to the ground. This may have ruled out apparition, but Peter had another trick up his sleeve to help him escape. The rat was able to squeeze his way free, and now just needed to find a quiet spot to transform back, then get the hell out of here. His transformation didn't go unnoticed though. He had attracted some attention from keen eyes. The rat's much smaller mass had caused some of the bodies lying on Peter to shift, something the dead shouldn't really do. Wormtail was scampering along when a fireball exploded close enough to singe his whiskers. The next one was right in front of him. The fireballs were deadly and became relentless, with Peter soon losing all sense of direction. The rat's only thought was survival, and that certainly meant avoiding being incinerated. He had no idea Wormtail was being shepherded to a specific location. As he just barely managed to dodge another deadly fireball, the trap was sprung. A scaly claw clamped around Wormtail, crushing ribs and snapping his spine. The rat became Peter, a Peter who couldn't move a muscle and had a Veela in her avian form screeching her victory above him. This was the sight that greeted the panting dog that bounded into the house, stopping Padfoot in his tracks. A gentle hand was soon scratching behind his right ear. "See, Sirius, this is why you should never piss your mother-in-law off. How is everyone else?" He transformed back into Sirius to regain the ability of hugging his pregnant wife. "Everyone's fine, love. I saw one warrior needing treatment and that was about it for our side." Having heard his name mentioned, there were anxious parents calling for his attention from the ballroom. The mystery of why Henrika and Ma were the only ones out here was soon explained. There were at least 8 dead Death Eaters lying blocking the destroyed doorway. Sirius, how are they?" "They're fine, Emma. When I left the 4 were all standing holding on to each other. Augusta, remember that curse Harry used on one of your garden walls? He did the same to Voldemort, blasted him right out of the fight before their Dark Lord could even get a curse off. He was currently holding his crying wife, Emma's tears being mostly of the relief variety, but Dan needed to hear the words. "And you're sure Hermione's fine? She was wrapped around my godson and kissing him for all she was worth, Dan. If Hermione had any injuries, then I didn't see them." The goblin warriors charged with a solid wall of shields. That wall opened and swallowed Hermione as she ran. "We've already seen evidence that more than one goblin loves your girl. Tonight was another. They weren't letting anything or anyone get near her. She was firing off spells from behind their shields." He then turned his attention to the Longbottoms and Pato. "Moody knows their abilities better than I do. He kept a close eye on Neville and Padua, but they fought as well as anyone out there. They were determined to fight their way through to their friends, and they did. Frank, Alice, those 2 are going to be as good as you were, if not better." They never got to say any more before an enhanced voice let them know they had company. "Hello, the House Ministry auras, and we're coming in." Amelia cast the same charm on herself before answering. "Director Bones on site, situation under control. Stand down and enter." They entered and 2 immediately gravitated toward guarding Pettigrew, their leader heading straight for their boss. He'd never had to give a report standing over dead bodies before. He'd never actually seen someone killed in battle before tonight, but pressed on. "The other site is under control, Director, but Aura Tonks asked me to report a problem. All the dead and injured are marked. She doesn't know what to do with them." "Oh, our new facility won't be ready for a few days yet. Do you know if Ambassador Barchoke was returning here or to Gringotts? I'm sorry, Director, there were lots of goblins present. I really can't tell one from the other. Amelia didn't like that answer or the disparaging tone used to give it, and she was in no mood to be gentle. The ambassador was wearing a suit while I'm sure the warriors would have been dressed in goblin armor. If you can't tell the difference between them, then it's time you considered another occupation. It shouldn't have escaped your notice either that those goblins got here before you did. Something we will be working on when I get back to the ministry. Let's see how many of these bodies you can recognize. Get this filth out of my house and dump them on the front lawn. But Director, the evidence is right in front of your nose. They are in full Death Eater regalia and physically broke into my house. We killed them. You can list cause of death as attacking my guests, the Chief Warlock, and I will sign them. Now get them out of here so I don't have to wade through them to leave my own ballroom. The bodies were soon being levitated out the front door, and Dobby assisted the Bones Elf with the cleanup that quickly followed. News that everyone in the other group was okay lifted the tension in the ballroom. Augusta, though, was still faced with the sad fact that there would be a lot more students able to see the Trolls when they returned to Hogwarts on Sunday. She was currently going around her students and seeing how they were coping with tonight, while dreading hearing how many of those Death Eaters had children at Hogwarts. The Hogwarts High Inquisitor then spotted a crying Parvati being comforted by her mother. The Patils staying with the Longbottoms over the holidays had certainly brought the two families closer together. While she certainly liked Parvati, Augusta was delighted her grandson had chosen her twin to be his mate. While Parvati had stood her ground and fired curses at the attackers, Padma had destroyed her beautiful dress and raced out of here at Neville's side. Padma had a core of iron running through her that acted like a magnet and attracted the same iron in Neville. Hearing Sirius compare the young couple to Frank and Alice was praise indeed. Augusta was also delighted to hear Parvati's tears were not for herself. Why does it always have to be them, Mum? There were even auras here tonight, but they still went. Augusta had watched her only child and his wife put their lives on the line every time they put their aura robes on. It was no coincidence. Voldemort wanted them dead. Frank and Alice were a real thorn in their side, just like the four who left here tonight. It's always hard to watch the ones you love put themselves in danger. That feeling won't go away just because those four will get older. All we can do is help them be the best they can and hope that's enough. They trained for this and had plenty of support tonight. That's why none of the fathers objected. Those auras are Amelia's and Amis's protection detail. They couldn't leave, only Tonks could. Smita had known all that and appreciated Augusta was trying to comfort Parvati. There was something she wanted to ask, though. Do you really think Harry can defeat Voldemort? I think tonight is a massive step in that direction. Voldemort was hurt tonight, and not just by Harry's spell. This is a hammer blow to his followers and his prestige. He set out to kill the head of the DMLA, and instead got well and truly beaten. That's never happened to him before. With the entrance now clear and clean, Amelia started moving her guests into a different part of the house. When the four returned with Bill and Barchoke, there was no jingoistic cheering from anyone. Neither was there any mention of claiming a victory tonight. Every single person invited to the party had graphically witnessed this was not a game. The four of them just wanted to find their families and ensure everyone was all right. Emma had both her children in her arms and was holding on like she never meant to let go. Her hug was being returned with equal ferocity by Harry and Hermione. Dan was removing his jacket to wrap around Hermione when Betsy appeared, her mistress' fur slippers and warm housecoat at the ready. Watching as the little elf berated his daughter for not taking better care of herself gave Dan a moment to reflect on how much their lives had changed, how much he had changed. The Dan Granger who dragged Hermione out of Gringotts that night would never have allowed his daughter to fight by Harry's side. That Dan Granger, though, no longer existed. This version knew that in any fight, the safest place for Hermione was with Harry. Her mate would put his own life on the line to protect her. That there were troops of goblin warriors all willing to do the same was a really humbling experience for her father. He'd fired both barrels into their attackers tonight, something else that the old Dan would have never considered himself capable of. The reason Dan fired only twice was, By the time he'd swapped guns, there were no more targets left standing. Dan was certain he'd hit what he'd aimed at, but had no idea of the final result. He was also certain that's why Amelia had the bodies moved quickly. She wouldn't want any of the teens thinking theirs was the curse that finished someone off. A lot of people had died tonight. The only thing being quietly celebrated here was the fact that it wasn't any of them. Once the little elf had finished berating Hermione, Betsy then threw her arms around her mistress's legs. "Mistress needs be more careful, Betsy needs her mistress." With a sob, the little elf was gone, leaving Hermione free for Dan to hug. With his daughter safely wrapped in his arms, he then noticed Emma still hadn't let Harry go. "I asked you to keep her safe, Harry, and you did. Thank you." This earned him a genuine smile from the serious young man. "No thanks needed, Dan. You held up your side of the bargain." This had Emma chuckling, though. Drew a groan from Hermione. "I swear that Padma's a bad influence on him." Barchoke was meanwhile having a conversation with Amos and Amelia on what to do with the dead and injured Death Eaters. They'd hit a sticking point, though. Goblins do not administer healing to those condemned to die. Keeping someone alive long enough so you can then kill them is pointless. I am of course assuming that will be the fate of those captured tonight. "Yes, it bloody will be." This coming from the moderate Amos somewhat shocked the other two. The chief warlock, though, was unrepentant regarding his change of attitude. Every one of them would have been marked by Voldemort in the last war. Had the problem been dealt with then, my wife and son would not have been faced with what happened here tonight. Emilia's opinion was never in any doubt. The fate that awaits Death Eaters caught supporting Voldemort has been well publicized. Only the fact that we're waiting on completion of our new facilities has held us back a few days. We also thought it would help if the children were back at Hogwarts before we started bursting into homes, just in case some don't want to come quietly. There's no danger of children being hit by any stray spells if they're safely back in the castle. We want these prisoners kept alive only until we can extract all the information they possess from them, especially Pettigrew. I will of course need to consult with the director on this matter. Meanwhile, our warriors will remain here until new wards can be erected. That will happen tomorrow. The large grandfather clock beginning to strike midnight saw Barchoke smile and change his mind. "Make that today. I shall leave at once and see if we can't get these bodies off your grass." Amelia held out her hand. "Thanks, Barchoke, and Happy New Year." She then did something unthinkable and kissed Barchoke on the cheek, discovering that goblins could actually blush. Amelia knew exactly what she owed this goblin. Without having those wards, warriors and their extended family here tonight, it could have easily been hers, and Susan's bodies lying out on the grass. Amelia didn't even want to think about what state those bodies would have been in. In the last war, Voldemort appeared to know every move they were going to make while the Ministry was flying blind for most of the time. The positions were now reversed, with the Death Eaters reduced to reading the Prophet to gather any intelligence. Since tonight's party had been for their extended family and a few close and trusted friends, Voldemort and his Death Eaters had found themselves facing forces far greater than they would ever have expected. That Harry had been able to hit the Dark Lord with a spell was also something no one had accomplished in the last war, not even Dumbledore. In any war, Amelia knew that luck could play a large part in the outcome. They had just been handed a massive slice of luck tonight, and she intended to capitalize on it. She needed to find Rita and wish her a happy new year too. Midnight reminded everyone why they had come here in the first place, and the traditional greeting was soon being offered to family and friends. It was then Harry spotted Pauline trying to hide away in a corner. He was soon beside the young girl. "Sorry your first party was ruined. Are you all right?" "I shouldn't be here, Harry. Do you want me to see Draco about taking you home?" This seemed to start the tears she'd obviously been fighting back. "I shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't even be talking to me, only because my father's locked up in Azkaban stopped him being one of those who attacked us tonight. How can you bear to be anywhere near me?" Harry's arm was soon around the crying 11-year-old, drawing her into a comforting hug and letting her cry onto Dan's borrowed jacket. His own was somewhere in the ballroom, but no one wanted to go back in there just yet. "That's exactly why you're here. You can see it's wrong to attack people like that." "Of course it's wrong. Those people tonight didn't think so. Your father didn't think so. Why should we treat you the same as them when you're clearly different? The little girl was now clinging to Harry and breaking her heart, her sobs clearly racking her body. Look at Draco and Pansy. They made their own decision on what they want to do. Pauline not will be given the same chance. Through her sobs, Pauline began to tell Harry of her fears. I thought I would have lost all my friends after tonight. It just hit me what my father is. How was I supposed to face Natalie again? Harry held her and let Pauline cry it out. There will be people lying dead out there who will have sons and daughters at Hogwarts. Those sons and daughters will be hurting, but we have to be the brave ones. We have to be the ones holding out the hand of friendship. We have to keep holding out that hand, no matter how many times it gets slapped away. Accepting that friendship means, like you, they are safe in here with us. The alternative is for them to be the ones left lying on the grass somewhere. Pauline's tears had all but stopped. She was so entranced by Harry's words. If you, Draco and Pansy, can see that, then I'm going to ask for your help to let others see what you do. Can you do that for me? I don't want there to be any more bodies lying on the grass. The young girl looked into those pleading green eyes and was lost. The self-revulsion from earlier that had been eating away at her soul was banished for good. Harry had not only given Pauline back her self-respect, he'd also provided a focus for her to actually help him. Pauline not only accepted, she silently swore never to let him down. Pansy, stepping in and leading Pauline away to freshen up, let the now embarrassed pair see that most of the room had been listening to their conversation. Hermione stepped forward, the sword still at her side, so at odds with her furry slippers and housecoat as to be comical. She was also wearing a large smile as she jokingly shook her head at her mate. Harry Crow, what am I going to do with you? She may not have been expecting an answer but received one from Padma. See Barchoke about building an extension onto Crow's Nest in Kingersea. Your mate seems determined to fill it with family. This was certainly greeted with chuckles, but as Hermione now sat beside her mate, most were still touched by his words. Amelia and Amos thought he'd summed up what the ministry needed to do beautifully, while Harry's words had a profound effect on Rita. The now freelance reporter had earlier hitched a ride with Barchoke and witnessed the entire battle. Amelia had also offered to give her an account of what happened inside the house. Now that Rita actually thought about it, she embodied everything Harry had just said. When she'd worked against them, Rita had soon been out of a job and shunned by everyone. She may not have been bodily lying on the grass, but her career was certainly as dead as those who currently were. Working for Barchoke had brought her not only riches but respect too, respect enough for Director Bones to seek her out and offer an interview. Tonight had the potential to change their world, and Rita Skeeter would be the one to tell that story. Rita might not have joined up for all the right reasons, but she was a convert now and certainly glad to be along for the ride. Anyone who could do things like that to Edmund and Bertha deserved everything that was coming their way. Rita witnessed the first proof tonight that justice might actually be served on the Dark Lord. Their new calendars might have informed the wizards and witches of Britain they had woken that morning to the first day of 1994. A more important publication cast doubt on that fact. The entire front page of the Daily Prophet might not have said so as such. But a new millennium had just been entered, irrespective of trivial things like the actual date. Their morning paper may have been delivered slightly later yet. Since this edition actually made history, there would be no complaints about its tardiness. There, on the front page of their daily newspaper, was irrefutable proof that Voldemort had returned. The only reason that people weren't running screaming from their homes after being presented with a picture of the clearly not dead Dark Lord was they were rendered mesmerized by what happened next. A course left the boy who lived and blasted the supposedly invincible Lord Voldemort clear out of the picture. With that one act, the boy who lived was literally golden. The Prophet's readers just had confirmation of their worst fears, only for their savior to prove he was once more up to the job of taking care of their Dark Lord problem. From this moment on, the boy who lived could call himself Marvin the Martian, and people would be queuing to add an emblem of the red planet to their robes in a show of their support for their hero. The second picture on the front page may not have moved, but it was every bit as iconic. dead Death Eaters lying on the grass at Bones Manor. The headline proclaiming Battle of Bones Manor told everyone where these events had happened. The pictures alone were enough to inform them what the outcome of that battle was. Rita's detailed accounts of both battles drew the readers right into the conflict, having them live every spell cast on this most momentous of nights. Her interview with the head of the DMLO, though, proved almost as iconic as those two pictures. Amelia didn't mince her words. This was an assassination attempt against me by this self-styled Dark Lord and his masked terrorists. It took over 24 of them, including Voldemort, to bring my wards down. Even then, a squad of goblin warriors arrived on my property before these attackers could take advantage of the situation. Centurion Crow was a guest in my house and reacted immediately as the alarm was sounded. He, his mate, Miss Hermione Granger, and the Ministry Aurora assigned as his protection detail, Aurora Tonks, led a few more of my guests against the group of Death Eaters deliberately left behind to stop reinforcements reaching the house. Harry taking out Voldemort at the start of the battle certainly swung it heavily in our favor. I led the defense of our home myself and offer no apologies for the bodies on the grass. There were approximately 20 current Hogwarts students attending this party, including my niece. We did what we needed to do to protect them. Amelia's words saw every parent reaching the exact same conclusion as the defenders. Had they been lucky enough to gain an invitation to Madam Bones' party, they wouldn't have held back with their spells either. It was the next part, though, that sent shivers down spines, whether those were shivers of fear or even pride depended on if the witch or wizard reading had been branded by Voldemort. The Ministry has held forward the hand of friendship and forgiveness to people who made a serious mistake over a decade ago. That same hand, though, can easily be clenched into a fist, ready to protect our friends and smite our enemies. Those who attacked my home clearly declared themselves enemies and paid the ultimate price. It was more than their blood that ran out onto the grass. Their families will face a heavy fine from the Ministry for these treasonous acts. 16 families are waking up to the news one of their members was killed. We have 4 wounded, all of whom will be tried for treason using truth serum, and a maximum of 5 who escaped. There can be no forgiveness for any of those 5, and the full weight of the Ministry will be brought to bear in the hunt for Voldemort, Lestrange, Rookwood, and the as yet unknown other 2 masked Death Eaters. There it was, in black and white, what the future held for Death Eaters in Britain. This had a profound effect in homes the length and breadth of the country. Thomas Avery had barely escaped last night with his life. It would appear his father wasn't as lucky. He would be heading to Gringotts, not to ask for forgiveness, but to empty his vault. He hoped to be in France by the time the Ministry came knocking on the door. John Gibbon was the other Death Eater the Ministry were looking for. He, though, had been badly injured in the fight, and it was nothing short of a miracle that he managed to apparate home. That was the last miracle for John. Despite his family's frantic efforts, he slipped away just before the dawn. They would now have to rush and cremate the body, denying the Ministry any evidence and hopefully saving what little wealth the family had. Every other marked Death Eater who hadn't already done so headed for Gringotts to throw themselves on the mercy of the Ministry. A competent Ministry of Magic and the Dark Lord being defeated again by the boy who lived made it look increasingly likely that they had picked the wrong side. It was time to change sides before it became too late. It was later than he'd hoped when an exhausted Bill reached the burrow. His family all knew he was attending the Bones party last night, and he'd planned on arriving there before the story broke. His work in Gringotts, though, had kept him busy all night. He was almost attacked by Ginny as she threw herself at her eldest brother. Molly wasn't far behind her daughter. Only when she'd confirmed for herself that her son was indeed fine did the lecture begin. "Since when did your new job include battling you-know-who? I almost had a heart attack when Skeeter mentioned you'd taken part in that charge against the Death Eaters. Mum, my job is to train Harry so that one day he'll be able to face Voldemort. Doing a hell of a job there, brother." "Sure is, Fred. Our Bill should be in line for a bonus after last night's efforts." It was a tired Bill who sat down at the table and helped himself to a cup of tea from the pot. Ginny was as close as she could get to her favorite brother, reassuring herself that he was okay while still desperate for news. "We got lucky. The Death Eaters thought they would heavily outnumber those in the house. They didn't know Amelia was holding a party. When Harry took Voldemort out of the fight, they didn't know what to do next. Percy was still studying today's paper in disbelief. Did Harry really do that? I was there, Percy. I understand where you're coming from, but I saw it for myself. Harry is an extremely powerful young man. I think he might even rival Dumbledore by the time he's ready to leave Hogwarts. Molly felt her question was being ignored, not something she was used to, so Bill found himself being interrupted. I still don't see why that meant you had to be there too. The 4 students I tutor raced into battle. What was I supposed to do? Hide? Trying to change the subject. Ginny asked the question she really needed to know the answer to. Are they really all okay? Hermione and Padma had some cuts and scratches on their feet. The shoes that would have been fine for dancing the night away weren't suitable for running across the grass. Both girls charged the Death Eaters in their bare feet. Harry might have a few bruises, but nothing more serious than that. Once the warriors got close enough to use their weapons, the battle was over seconds later. I don't know how I feel about goblins attacking wizards. Listen, Mum, if the Death Eaters ever attack the burrow, I promise you'll be glad of their help. They arrived well before the Aurors, and it was their own director who was being attacked. This finally saw Ron speak out. Why would the goblins protect us? Ron, you of all people should know how goblins react when one of their friends or family is being attacked. Why do you think Dad was woken and had to leave for Gringotts in the middle of the night? He's the Ministry's contact with the nation. You better believe the warriors would come running if he was attacked. I still don't understand why Arthur had to be dragged out of bed. His exhaustion was shortening Bill's temper. Mum, the Ministry can't take any marked Death Eaters past their wards, even dead ones. All the bodies and the injured are currently inside Gringotts. Of course, the Ministry is going to need its own contact with the nation's ambassador for that. Dad is having to liaise between all the witches and wizards summoned to Gringotts, as well as those relatives who will be heading there after reading this morning's paper. You always wanted Dad to get a better job at the Ministry. Now he's got one of the most important posts there is. You probably won't be seeing much of him over the next few days. There is a lot of work to do. This piqued Percy's interest. What is it Dad is actually doing? Each of those who attacked the Bones residents last night are seeing fines of 80% of their family's wealth levied against them. The goblins will be doing the collecting. Whose job is it to work between the two governments? I'm going home to grab a few hours sleep before I need to return to Gringotts and help. There must be about half the Ministry currently working inside Gringotts, dealing with both of these problems, and Dad is overseeing the entire Ministry side of the operation. Why do you think he got such a rise in salary? He's earning every knot of that salary today. The effects of this measure wasn't lost on the current Hogwarts head boy. This could see some of the wealthiest pureblood families stripped of their wealth and power. As Percy's words sunk into all the Weasleys, Bill not only confirmed that would be the case, but gave his backing to the policy. The Ministry is taking the action it said it would. Voldemort and his cronies are trying to overthrow the legal government of our country so he can rule as a dictator. There is only one real punishment for that. Their response against the attackers last night was swift and hard, just as they said it would be. After posting the warnings about what following this madman would cost them, the Ministry can't then take it easy on the Death Eaters' families. In Kingiacy, the family was certainly taking it easy. Hermione was lying back on a sofa with a book in her hands. Her feet were currently resting across Harry's lap, with his left arm liberally coated in a cream to help reduce bruising. The still painful-to-touch limb was currently resting in a sling. Dan was fussing over his pregnant wife while Tonks quietly chatted to Remus. What does it feel like to know Peter is finally captured? The werewolf took a moment to think before answering his girlfriend. I'm relieved he can no longer do any harm, but I'm having trouble equating that thing we saw lying on the floor last night with the boy I attended Hogwarts with for 7 years. I know the Ministry were desperate to get information out of him. I just want to know why he betrayed his friends. Noticing their conversation wasn't as quiet as they thought, Remus directed his next remark to the two teens, who were obviously listening. I know you'll find this hard to believe, but the marauders were as close as you four are, Peter. To us would be like Neville or Padma betraying you two. Harry was quicker than Hermione to defend their friends. She clearly agreed with his opinion, though. Never going to happen, Remus. Neville doesn't have a dishonest bone in his body, and Padma's a true friend. We trust those two with our lives, just like we trusted Peter with ours, and your mum and dad paid the ultimate price for that trust. That's why I can understand Sirius chasing after Peter. It really was a betrayal that cut to the bone. Sirius was really fond of Moa before this happened. You can bet he loves his mother-in-law now. The other couple present then joined what had now become a discussion. Lucas and Moa are leaving for Sweden in the morning, aren't they? Tonks was nodding her agreement to Emma as she answered. Yeah, they'll be returning to Britain though, as Henrika gets closer to her due date. This was something Harry hadn't thought of. Will Henrika be able to teach until the end of term? It was her fellow professor who answered that one. No, the baby's due right at the start of the holidays. I know she's hoping to make it up until the exams, but the baby might have something to say about that. Hermione then turned to her parents, asking the question the couple really wanted to know the answer to. Mum, Dad, have you decided what you're going to do yet? Your mum and I spoke about it last night before we went to sleep. Today it still seems like the right thing to do. After we see the pair of you onto the express tomorrow, we'll both be heading for the island. It was only their injuries that stopped both teens springing right over there. The wide smiles of relief, now worn, was almost as good as a hug to Dan and Emma. She then picked up where her husband had left off. We plan to take Harry's book of properties with us and sit studying it in the sunshine. Barchoke has promised to get us portkeys to wherever we want to go, and Dobby will of course be looking after us. We'll keep in touch through Barchoke, so send any letters to us there. Dobby will be collecting and passing on any mail from us. Harry was delighted with that news. No one should be able to trace the Grangers, because even they wouldn't know exactly where they were. He just wished his parents had adopted the same approach. That's a brilliant idea. You saying you'll be traveling to my house in Spain won't mean a thing unless someone had access to the property book. Since you will have the only copy, you should be perfectly safe. Father will know how to reach you in case of any emergencies. That was picked up at once by a concerned Dan. Are you expecting there to be any emergencies? If so, I vote you both come with us. I'm not expecting any, to be honest. Dan, I don't think Gringotts or the Ministry know what to expect next. Remus was quick to agree with that. In the last war, getting a few families out before the Death Eaters attacked was about the best we could have hoped for. Winning a major battle, never mind hitting Voldemort with a spell, is unprecedented. What happens next is anyone's guess. I do know that Tonks and I, the Blacks and Augusta, will all be keeping an eye on them at Hogwarts. With Bill and Mad-Eye regularly popping in and out too, there should be enough of us there to deal with any so-called emergencies that come along. While not completely happy with that answer, Dan and Emma thought it was the best they were going to get. No one likes to think their children could be in danger, but they also had to take into account that the 4 teens had proven once more that they could look after themselves when they needed to. Talk drifted onto this year's summer holidays, but there really was little enthusiasm for making any plans. Harry was going to become a godfather and a brother this summer. Any plans made would have to work around those 2 massive events. Henrika and Emma would be the important ones this year. All other arrangements would revolve around them. Harry floated the idea of having a good-sized swimming pool attached to the property, rather than a tiny one at the end of their new training room. Enclosing it in some kind of weatherproof structure was also cited as a must, as a few other amendments were added to enhance the original idea. The 6 spent a pleasant afternoon just chatting as friends and family do, trying to put the horrors of last night behind them by looking forward to more pleasant things. Rookwood and Bella didn't have that luxury. They didn't have any luxuries at all. They only had time last night to grab the biggest tent and a few supplies before fleeing to another part of the country. They were also exhausted by having to transport and care for their master, his familiar, and everything else they could take with them to Dartmoor. Peter's pet didn't count as an essential. She didn't count at all. They left her sitting on the grass. Bertha might even live if the Ministry got to her before she froze to death. They were currently sitting in their one remaining tent. The heat from the flat stones Bella had placed a warming charm on, keeping more than the snake warm. Their master was still unconscious, and they had tended to his leg as best they could. Bella, though, had been on a constant rant ever since they had settled down with nothing to do but wait. They had protective wards up. A summoned and then prepared rabbit was now gently simmering away in a pot, while the tent and a few warming charms protected them from the elements. Bella, though, was still stuck in a revenge groove, where everyone was soon going to suffer when their master returned to power. Augustus had been listening to this for hours before finally reaching his breaking point. It was time his mate started living in the real world. Bella, we're going to have to spend the next few months struggling just to survive. I keep saying things have changed, and last night showed that I would guess that we are the only two Death Eaters left in Britain, the only two that support our master anyway. We all made mistakes last night and now we're paying the price. Are you saying our master made a mistake? We would normally have known exactly who was inside that house. We would probably have been able to get a few of our supporters in there too. I understood what our master was attempting last night, but committing all his followers to attacking while blind to what we were facing was a desperate play we didn't need to make at that moment. Then the error was compounded. What did I do wrong? The edge now on Bella's voice was unmistakable. Augustus knew, though, that he had to get his point across. Otherwise, they would all soon be dead anyway. They couldn't afford any more mistakes. When Potter attacked our master, we were left facing less than 10 witches and wizards with about 20 goblins. Those were certainly not insurmountable odds. Even when you left to check on our master, we still had a chance. Pressing ahead with the attack on the house doomed us all. That cowardly bastard Peter couldn't wait to get away from the fight. If they could spare that many people to attack us, did the fool think he was going to face better odds inside the house? You had rightly chosen all our best fighters to attack the Bones residents. When they left, though, so did our chances of winning the battle. And what mistakes did you make, Augustus? His master's voice may be weak, but Rookwood still felt the menace it contained. He hadn't noticed their master regaining consciousness. Augustus had hoped to work on convincing Bella first. Both at the same time meant his life was in real danger here. Master, I should have offered my counsel, but held my tongue. I could have countermanded Bella's order to attack the house, but that would have sown confusion amongst us, and perhaps been just as bad. I didn't even signal a retreat, though. I knew we were lost. I let them fight to the end to buy the three of us enough time to get away. I failed you, Master, and will accept my punishment. Voldemort so wanted to kill him, to kill anyone. Bella, gently lifting his head to administer some hot sweet tea, gave him a moment to think that he was lying in a tent, sipping tea instead of tucked up in a bed with a pain relief potion to ease his injury. Told its own story. He knew bringing down those wards last night had taken a lot out of him. Even at full strength, though, his shield would have had trouble dealing with a spell of that power. This saw Tom's thoughts shifting in another direction. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. He'd certainly felt Potter's power last night. If this was all that he was left with, then punishing Rookwood really wasn't an option. He needed the man to help him figure out how they could recover from this. After they had killed Bones last night, Tom's intentions were to grace one of his followers with his presence in their home. Then it would have been time to start killing the traitors who'd refused to answer his summons. Instead, he found everything Tom Riddle had worked for since his days as a Hogwarts student being turned to ashes, ironically by a current Hogwarts student. Tom Riddle had nothing, no breeding, money or political power, yet he'd charmed, coaxed and cajoled his way to the very top. Lord Voldemort was only a whisker away from having it all, only for the prize to be snatched away that terrible Halloween. Now, over 12 years later, the same boy had effectively destroyed him once more. Lying injured in a tent, with only 2 followers left in the country, and all his anchors destroyed, was not how his life was supposed to proceed. Rookwood, there will be no punishment coming from me. The mistake I made last night was in choosing the wrong target. While Bones is undoubtedly a thorn in our side, the dagger in our heart is Harry Potter. I see now that we will never be treated as anything other than criminals. While that boy still lives, while Potter lives, The witches and wizards of Britain think they are safe from Lord Voldemort. Our task will be to show them they are wrong before we then kill the boy." Bella was almost drooling with excitement at that. She never even got to kill anyone last night. "Do you have a plan, my master?" "Patience, Bellatrix, patience. That will have to be our new watchword, as it will take time to regain all that we have lost. The first thing we need to do is find better dwellings. These are fine for an emergency, but certainly not suitable for a pregnant witch." "Can I assume you dealt with our guest from the ministry?" "No, master. Augustus advised me not to." The Dark Lord's gaze once more pinned Rookwood, leaving him hastily offering an explanation. "If we had killed her, it would have been simply a case of the ministry burying the body. Should they find her alive, not only will they have to care for her, it will be a constant reminder of what can happen to those who oppose you, master." "Very well. Along with the new residents, we also need intelligence on what is happening around us. This rise of the beasts can't have pleased everyone, and that is something we can surely exploit. We will pay them reminders that we are still a threat while working toward getting our hands on Potter. Killing him is the key to all of this." No one in the tent was saying so, but all three were thinking that might be easier said than done. Anyone who could blast through the Dark Lord's shield had to be treated as a serious threat. Dolores seriously considered giving up drinking when she read the New Year's Day edition of The Prophet. She must have drunk a lot more last night than she'd thought. Dolores had to be hallucinating, because this couldn't be true. This wasn't a new year, it was a descent into chaos, a chaos their world might never recover from. Goblin warriors were featured on the front page, graphically depicted by Skeeter-hacking pureblood witches and wizards with their swords and axes. Instead of announcing a call to arms, getting ready to wipe out these bloodthirsty creatures and all their kin, those very same murdering creatures were publicly being thanked for their courageous and heroic efforts by the ministry. Dolores had never been a Death Eater, but that was mainly because she had never been asked to join. She certainly could be classed as sympathetic to their cause, this latest atrocity making her even more committed to restoring the magical community back to its former glory. Their entire society appeared caught in a race to declare their proud and ancient heritage of blood purity as worthless. She was now going to have to use the successes this new year would bring to see herself elevated to at least the position of a departmental head. Only then would she have the power to start applying pressure in order to start reversing some of these changes. There were a lot more witches and wizards out there, though, who thought the same as she did. Dolores Umbridge was going to be quietly courting their support and building a platform for herself so she could attain her ultimate goal. Dolores Umbridge, Minister of Magic, had such a nice ring to it. Dumbledore had rung in the new year the day before he got that historic issue of The Prophet. Unlike Dolores, Albus found himself in need of a drink. Unlike the majority of the British magical community, the sight of Harry blasting Tom right out the picture was not a cause for celebration. Far from it. How the hell was he supposed to make a triumphant return to a Britain controlled by Harry and his goblin masters? Albus was now certain Godric's sword had taken on the properties of the Elder Wand, giving considerably more power to that teenage boy and making his blade an even more formidable weapon in those skilled hands. He had also seen the evidence that the goblins could destroy Horcruxes with his own eyes. Harry had marched proudly up to Filius and handed over Rowena's diadem right in front of him. If they had destroyed all Tom's Horcruxes and Harry was able to vanquish the Dark Lord, what was there left for Albus to do? Since his timetable for returning home was already set, Albus would just have to keep a careful eye on the Prophet for further developments. It was rather ironic that both Dumbledore and Voldemort were reduced to reading the Prophet to discover news on the country that each had thought they controlled. The Prophet's front page the following day would certainly be of interest to both wizards. Not only were those who died or had been captured in the attack named, the Dark Lord's hideout also made the front page. That it was a Muggle tent ended any hope the Dark Lord Voldemort had of regaining his former pure-blood followers. Bertha Jorkins was also in the picture, with blankets draped around her shoulder as she was led away from the scene. Initial reports had her being tortured into insanity, but the family got the full story from Barchoke. They had used Harry's portkey from Kingersea to Gringotts. This was their only chance to speak to him before they left for King's Cross and Hogwarts. Barchoke had been incredibly busy and hadn't made it back up to Kingersea since Amelia's party. We can't help that poor witch. She wasn't tortured using the Cruciatus. Voldemort shredded her mind. There's simply nothing left of Bertha Jorkins to repair. Pettigrew told us everything he could, including how his master got a new body. The good news, though, is that we've disposed of all of his Horcruxes. Voldemort can now be killed. Barchoke hated deliberately withholding information from his children, but felt it was a necessity in this case. If Harry were to come face to face with Bellatrix Lestrange, knowing the witch was pregnant, might cause him to hesitate in doing what he needed to. The Lestrange bitch wouldn't hesitate, though, nor would she hold back. Gringotts and the Ministry were quietly celebrating the news. Voldemort was mortal once more. Neither had much spare time to do anything else. The Ministry's new facility would be ready for business later on today, swinging into action with at least 4 trials. The Goblins also had never been busier, chasing down Ministry fines and erecting their wards on premises all over the country. The 6 said their goodbyes to Barchoke before heading through the alley on their journey to King's Cross. Remus was going to be traveling on the train with them. This, though, was not just an excuse, so he could spend more time with his girlfriend. There would be some grieving and hurting students on that train. Remus was going to be there to ensure nothing came of those emotions when faced with the reasons for their missing relatives. If some of the looks coming in their direction as they walked through the alley were any indication of what they might face on the train, Remus just might be needed. They had barely set foot on the platform before being surrounded by friends, surrounded as much as the tight platform and crowd would allow, that is. The tightness of the platform played no part, though, in the large male student who very deliberately barged into Harry. "Crow, you killed my father. You and your friends better watch your backs in Hogwarts." The sound of ripping cloth signified the end of that little speech, that and the golden gauntlet grabbing the large Slytherin by the throat. "Flint, here's some free advice. You tell a goblin you're going to harm him later, presumably when the conditions and numbers suit you better. That goblin won't watch his back. That goblin will think, why the hell should I wait, and just kill you where you stand." Marcus Flint was helpless as this golden-clad figure lifted him off the ground by the throat with one hand. Hermione, Padma and Neville were quick to draw their wands, in case this was a prelude to a larger attack, their eyes now scanning the crowd for any signs of aggression as they guarded Harry's back. Tonks had done the same, while shaking her head at Remus not to become involved. This matter needed settled, and she trusted Harry not to take the situation too far. "Your father turned up at Bones Manor wearing a mask, and was there with the intention to murder innocent women and children. Are you okay with that, Flint? If you think that's acceptable behavior, then surely, by your same warped logic, it must be acceptable for me just to kill you now. I don't need a mask. I am Hogwarts champion and will do my best to protect everyone inside her walls. You or any of your friends, start anything, I'll be there waiting." Since the large Slytherin's face was beginning to take on a distinctly Ravenclaw color, Harry let him drop to the ground. "I don't care what your parents did, Flint. I only look at the person in front of me. You now have to go away and make a decision. Do I want to be like my father, or do I want to live? You threaten me or mine again. I'll assume you've already made that decision and act accordingly. I have no fight with you, but I won't back down if you come looking for one either." Amelia had been on the platform and headed straight for the disturbance, arriving as Harry dropped the 7th-year Slytherin to the ground. She waited until Harry had explained what was happening to the Flint boy, knowing that the story would soon spread throughout the platform and train, before she interceded. "Everything okay here, Centurion Crow?" "Yes, Director?" Mr. Flint was just under the misconception he could threaten me and mine without facing any repercussions. He, and everyone else, now know that's not the case. I was afraid this might happen. That is why there will be 6 Auras on the Express, 7 counting Aura Tonks. I think I will contact Madame Longbottom and offer to base a squad inside Hogwarts for the next few weeks. That should give tempers time to cool, allowing rational heads a chance to take over. Amelia was able to do this because of the large number of Death Eaters who had approached the Ministry seeking protection. She was only having to send teams out to arrest 3 outstanding names, and had heard whispers that one of those names was already dead. The 2 remaining would be arrested and tried today, along with the 4 prisoners from the attack on her home. News of the crimes these Death Eaters had committed should appear in tomorrow's Prophet, hopefully aiding them in their case for branding these scum as nothing more than terrorists. The Ministry was determined that by the end of today, there would only be Voldemort, Lestrange and Rookwood still to be brought to justice. The McDonalds had been standing beside the Grangers and the Creevies when the incident kicked off. Roy had trouble believing what he just witnessed. Harry lifted that bigger boy as if he was nothing. Little Natalie was quick to spring to her hero's defense. Harry is a centurion, that makes him an officer in their army. If he can blast Voldemort right of the page, he can easily deal with a Hogwarts student. The Creevy parents only smiled at the young witch, knowing their eldest son had rather a large dose of the same hero worship. When we read what happened in the Prophet, we were actually glad that we missed this year's New Year party. Not half as glad, though, that our house has the same wards as Amelia's. Roy certainly agreed with being thankful their houses were protected by the same wards. He also offered his sympathies to the Grangers. You've had quite the time of it over the holidays. First the Dursleys being murdered and then getting attacked at the New Year party. Dan was watching as Emma ensured Harry was okay while Hermione carried out some running repairs to his ripped shirt. Harry maintains the Dursleys were not his family. He only met them once, and that was by accident. As for the party, the whole thing was over in seconds. Harry's team had the harder task. Trained troops against unorganized terrorists was only going to see one winner from that battle. The Ministry, the Hogwarts staff, and of course Harry will make sure your children remain safe inside the castle. This drew a sigh of resignation from Roy. I know Natalie spent most of yesterday saying the same things. She was terrified we would stop her returning to Hogwarts. Children just don't realize how hard it is for a parent to let them go, especially to a world they know nothing about. This is the hardest decision we've ever had to make in our lives. As Hermione raced over to give him a hug and a kiss on the cheek before taking Natalie by the hand toward the train, Dan knew exactly how the McDonalds felt. The Creevies would also see their second son, Dennis, making the same journey come September. It suddenly hit Dan that one day he and Emma would have to go through all this again with their own son. As that revelation hit, an even bigger one followed right behind it. While Emma fussed over Harry and Hermione as they climbed aboard the train, Dan suddenly realized that he wouldn't change a thing. Even after the horrors they'd faced recently, Hermione still smiled more than she'd ever done. Then there was the fact that he was about to head off to a tropical island with his pregnant wife, and Dobby would be there to take care of them. Magic had certainly brought some bad things into their lives, but as a pregnant Emma returned to his arms, Dan couldn't help but think the good far outweighed the bad. They, like the rest of the parents on the platform, waved to their children as the steam engine pulled them on their long journey to the Scottish Highlands. He held his wife close, and Dan was sure of only one thing. Whatever challenges 1994 brought, they would face them as a family, an ever-expanding family. It was a very quiet return train journey back up to Hogsmeade. "What did you do at the holidays?" being rarely asked. It was also noticeable that the Slytherin contingent of their friends was missing. Draco, though, had stuck his head into their compartment earlier to offer an explanation. Vince's father was killed while Greg's is one of the 4 the Ministry captured that night. They're not in a good place at the moment, so we're trying to help. It's also not going down too well with some in our house that there were Slytherins at the party who drew their wands. Apparently we were supposed to let the Death Eaters kill us. I'm just really pleased Amelia has stationed auras on the train. Remus decided he too would patrol the train. Tonks, though, wasn't leaving Harry's compartment until they reached their destination. Inside the Hogwarts Great Hall, you would have needed a spurtle to stir the atmosphere that was as thick as porridge, though nowhere near as good for you. The atmosphere was so oppressive that Madame Longbottom stood to address the students before the feast began. On New Year's Eve, I, along with a number of Hogwarts students, attended a party held by Director Bones. I don't think there is anyone here who doesn't know what happened during that party. It saddens me more than I can say that this madman Voldemort was allowed to manipulate a rift in our society that resulted in wizard fighting against wizard, in some cases brother against brother. While the Ministry is working hard to ensure that situation will never happen again and hopes to arrest all those still at large, We mustn't let this conflict take root inside this castle's walls. Augusta's steely gaze swept over everyone present. She deliberately didn't linger on the Slytherin table, though everyone knew that's where the trouble would come from. These terrorists have already had an impact on some of our students. These sudden deaths have filled me with sadness, but also a hint of pride in seeing the dignified manner with which the individuals have handled their situations. Should any student feel the need to talk about what has happened with their family, please see your head of house and know also that my door is always open to you. The sins of the parents will not be visited on their children, but any of those children seeking revenge or retribution will be dealt with most severely. Whichever side of the so-called divide they claim to support. This is a school. Feuds or fighting will not be tolerated here. Have I made myself clear? Augusta indicated each table in turn and didn't move on to the next house until she received a positive response from the students sitting there. Only then was it time to eat. There were no smart comments coming from Roger at the Ravenclaw table. There was hardly a comment to be heard in the entire hall. Everyone just ate their meal and got out of there as fast as they could. Harry intended to have a chat with Helena later tonight. The Hogwarts ghosts, portraits and house elves could very effectively monitor exactly what was happening inside the castle. That information might allow them to nip things in the bud, because there was no way there wouldn't be students out for some retribution. The Ministry were also looking for retribution, though through due legal process. Their new facility would certainly have been appreciated by any goblin. Spartan was an apt description. Since it was only going to be used for the short-term holding and then the resulting trial of Death Eaters, there was no need for anything more. Cornelius would settle for functional. It was here to fulfill a function, and it was time to get down to that function. Pettigrew was the first prisoner brought before the court. There was no need for chains to restrain the prisoner with a broken neck. Peter couldn't even support himself to sit up. He would face justice while lying unmoving on a bed. Amelia limited the evidence to the Death Eater's actions since first leaving Britain in search of his master. The crimes he committed in assisting Voldemort regain a body, his actions afterwards against Bertha Jorkins and attacking her house were easily enough to see Peter Pettigrew sentenced to death. The Spartan appearance of their temporary courtroom lending itself to the stark reality of what happened next. With no access to the Ministry for Death Eaters, they couldn't be sentenced to the Vale. The alternative option put forward was accepted by all and administered in front of the sitting court. Veritaserum was carefully controlled because, if the maximum dose were to be accidentally exceeded, there was no antidote or way to postpone the inevitable. This potion targeted the brain and stopped a person from lying. An overdose, though, was a completely different matter. An excess of Veritaserum started working on those parts of the brain that function quietly in the background, keeping the heart beating and the lungs drawing breath. The person would soon slip into a coma as their body's automatic functions were disrupted so severely they would be dead within 10 minutes. Since they were in a comatose state so quickly, it was considered a relatively painless way of administering a death sentence. Once Peter entered that comatose state, he was wheeled away to die alone in his cell. It was time to bring the next one in. Gregory Goyle Sr. was a sorry sight as they wheeled him into the new courtroom. The reason he was wheeled in was that Goblin Steel had removed his right leg above the knee and the same arm from just behind his wrist. Again, his questioning left the court with no other option than to convict. He had been pleased not to be chosen to attack the house because they only expected a few targets there. Gregory had been looking forward to picking off the goblins when they arrived. No one missed the irony that it was the goblins who'd done the picking, a battle axe removing both wand arm and leg in one powerful swipe. As he was sentenced to death, the Death Eater broke down in tears. The tears, though, proved not to be for himself, but rather his son, the Veritaserum in his system, letting everyone know Gregory was genuine in his request. He begged those present to help his family, to ensure his son and heir would not make the same mistakes his father had. Gregory was certainly smart enough to know what his fate could be when he once more donned his Death Eater regalia. He also recognized long ago that he was a follower rather than a leader. With no one there to tell him not to attend at the solstice, Gregory had followed the habit of a lifetime and responded to his master's summons. He had become a Death Eater with dreams of easy pickings, riches and power. If he had to kill a few muggles or blood traitors along the way, that was something he was quite prepared to do. Gregory then discovered a universal truth. In a situation like this, the rich got richer and only the powerful gained more of what they craved. Since he was neither wealthy or powerful, he didn't exactly benefit from the spoils of their terror campaign. He was a good Death Eater who followed orders and kept out of trouble, at least up until now. His biggest asset all throughout his life had been his physical appearance. He was considered a hulking bull of a wizard. With no wand arm and most of a leg missing, he was ready to accept his punishment, thankful that at least it would be painless. They had all dreaded being faced with a Dementor. This method was certainly preferable to that horror. Hearing the condemned wizard's pleas for his family just reinforced Amelia's determination to see things change. They all knew that the problem would never fully go away, while one section of their society thought they were superior simply by their accident of birth. Her own extended family was actually now placed firmly at the other extreme of that argument. Goblins, muggles, Veela and a werewolf would certainly struggle to be accepted by those promoting pure-blood supremacy. There must be a middle ground, though, that should be acceptable to all. Calling a family blood traitors and turning up unannounced to kill them certainly wasn't it. If they could deal with Voldemort and his Death Eaters, then Amelia was confident their society would be in a much better place. The younger students coming through Hogwarts would certainly help see to that. The younger students certainly knew which side they were on, and it wasn't Flint's. Of the lower 3 years of Slytherins, only Crabbe and Goyle were unsure of which side to join. Everyone else was aligned firmly behind Draco in his stand against the 7th year's attempt to drum up Death Eater support inside Slytherin. When someone blows off the door of your house and races in firing killing curses, are we just supposed to stand there and let them kill us because your father might be amongst them? No self-respecting Slytherin would have been there in the first place. The Bones are blood traitors, which is nothing more than a term coined by a half-blood bastard to encourage purebloods to kill each other. Pansy was livid with this asshole, and the opinions he was spouting. The still grieving witch wasn't for holding back either as she sprang to her mate's defense. It wasn't the Ministry who killed my father. He was tortured to death because he made sure his wife and daughter was safe from the people you seem so keen to support. The angry witch was now really turning the screw. The prophet announced there was a battle at Bones Manor. They got it wrong. There was no battle. The attacking Death Eaters were slaughtered. The exact same thing will happen to anyone else who tries to support the same stupid shit you're promoting here. You will be nothing more than lambs to the slaughter. Flint looked ready to take matters further when a voice stopped him, reaching for his wand. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Harry had quietly entered the Slytherin common room. With all eyes on the escalating confrontation, no one had seen him until he spoke out. This isn't Ravenclaw, Crow. No one gives a shit what you say in here. These traitorous bastards must have given you the password to get in. I am Hogwarts champion. Flint, no doors inside the castle are barred to me, even the Chamber of Secrets. It was a frightened Pauline who asked the question that most of the house wanted to know the answer to. What are you doing in here, Harry? The Baron contacted me about a disturbance in his house. He's been pleased with the steps his house had been taking to once more embrace their great history, and didn't want to see Slytherin slip back into the mire. The Baron is giving me the chance to sort it before Professor McGonagall or Madame Longbottom need to become involved. And just what has this got to do with them? We're having a house discussion here. Flint, you may be even stupider than I originally thought. You've lost your father and 80% of your family's wealth. Do you really want to make the situation worse by getting kicked out of Hogwarts before sitting your nenny with teas? The High Inquisitor made her position on this matter crystal clear, calling your attempt to bully students into accepting Death Eaters or even human a house meeting just won't wash. Who are you to talk about human? You strut about claiming to be a goblin when everyone can see you're not. This drew a gasp of breath from a lot of the watchers, fearing Flint had gone too far. This, after all, was the individual who had bested Voldemort in battle. Harry's answer might have been cold, but no one could miss the fire in his eyes. Flint certainly couldn't, since that's where those blazing orbs were directed. I'm well aware that, biologically, I'm not goblin. It is kind of hard to miss the physical differences. You strut about claiming to be a pure blood. How does your pure blood make you different? Does it make you stronger? Smarter? You tell me how being a pure blood gives anyone the right to wear a mask and kill people without any retribution. Flint didn't really know how to answer that, but Harry kept pushing. My grandparents' pure blood didn't protect them when the Death Eaters came calling. Neither did my dad's when Voldemort himself killed him. Draco and Pansy's fathers were both pure bloods and both Death Eaters. They were still killed by these murderers. Tell me why your father was any different from ours. Harry had been moving until he was now directly in front of the large Slytherin. In the last couple of years I've seen troll blood, basilisk blood, goblin blood, muggle blood, and so-called pure blood spilled. You want to know what all of these had in common? No matter who or what you are, lose enough of your blood and you die. That's what blood is there for, to keep us alive, not so one group of society can use it to claim they are better than the rest of us. The seventh-year Slytherin felt he had to do something, but when Crow kept pushing, all he was left with was taking a step back. Not an effective counter-strategy, but Harry didn't leave him any other option. Harry then explained that to the entire house of Slytherin. Flint here would love to prove everything I'm saying is lies, but he can't. He would also like to pound me into the ground, but again he can't. This half-blood who calls himself a goblin may be 4 years younger than Flint, but I'm faster, stronger and more powerful in every way. How does your pure blood supremacy account for that? The person who started the entire war isn't even a pure blood. His father was a muggle. Harry had the larger wizard now backed up against a wall. He then turned his back on Flint to talk to the rest of the house, knowing Draco, Pansy, Blaise and Daphne would keep an eye on the troublemaker for him. At the very least, giving him a warning if he needed to act. The Death Eaters that night were expecting a slaughter. They just thought they would be the ones carrying it out. Instead, they found themselves facing trained goblin troops and some highly skilled witches and wizards. They were outnumbered, outmatched and too afraid of their psychopath of a leader to do the sensible thing and get the hell out of there. This is war. It's not heroic. And certainly not pretty. Every one of us there that night only wanted to dance and have fun while bringing in the new year, not be fighting for our lives instead. He then made an appeal directly to them. This war will see us all having to make decisions. I'm not going to do a Flint though, and try to bully you into seeing things my way. If I needed to do that, then I would have already lost the argument. Harry looked towards some of his Slytherin friends, silently apologizing for what he was about to do. Theodore Nott Sr. attempted to murder my father, yet I call his son and daughter friends. They don't share their father's beliefs, so why shouldn't they be my friends? Draco falls squarely into the same category. You all need to reach decisions of your own, but not tonight. Not when you're still hurting. Talk to your friends, professors, you trust. Don't let anyone bully you into something that will affect the rest of your life. It's your life. Take your time and reach the decision that's right for you, because you are the one that needs to live with it. His appeal appeared to be having some effect, if only because his technique was different from Flint's demanding of their support. Harry decided to quit while he was ahead. Voldemort and his Death Eaters became my enemies from that Halloween night he murdered my parents. I sincerely hope I have no enemies here tonight. Well said, Centurion. The entire Slytherin common room turned to see Slughorn, McGonagall and Longbottom standing at the door. McGonagall, though, wasn't as lavish with her praise. While I might agree with Madame Longbottom's sentiments, I feel I must take 10 points from Ravenclaw for you being out past your curfew. If it happens again, it will mean a detention with me. I shall issue you with a pass to allow you safe passage back to your own house. Harry could see by the twinkle in McGonagall's eyes she was secretly pleased with him, and he would also be getting those points back in her next class. He decided to use the situation to his own advantage and interrupted the Hogwarts deputy. That won't be necessary, Professor. I am Hogwarts champion, and the castle's portraits and ghosts would never let me be caught out past curfew. I also have certain other advantages. With a flick and a swirl, his dad's invisibility cloak was around his shoulders, leaving only his head floating there. Good night, everyone. With that, Harry raised his hood and disappeared. The effect on the Slytherins couldn't be missed as another page was added to the legend that Harry Crow was quickly becoming. Why would you want someone who was quick as lightning and every bit as powerful as an enemy? Factor in that he possessed a spy system inside the castle that was second to none and could also be standing right beside you without you even knowing, that left you with an individual who was not to be messed with. Marcus Flint went to bed an angry young wizard. He deliberately sought out Theo not first thing next morning. Your father is in Azkaban, yet you don't seem to want revenge on the people who put him there. What kind of a son are you? The kind who knows his responsibilities. I have a responsibility to my family, my mother and my sisters. My father would have us all paupers and shunned by society. My responsibility is to try and prevent that, not seek pointless revenge. My father committed crimes, was caught, tried and sentenced. That's why he's in Azkaban, not because he was a believer in some higher cause. Of course it's a higher cause. These people enter our world and need to be taught their place in it. Theo had been waiting on Pauline, and the little witch had heard what was said as she approached. She rounded on Flint with a bravery any Gryffindor would have been proud of. Well, Voldemort certainly sailed through the air when Harry hit him with that curse. Does that count as a higher cause? I was at that party, me, the daughter of a convicted Death Eater. Not only was I treated the same as everyone else, they made sure I was protected when those murderers blasted through the doors. My father deserved to go to Azkaban, and I fully support what my head of house is doing now. A raging Flint was further taunted by the little witch. Their confrontation had drawn a lot of attention, and both knew this would prevent him taking this any further. Go on then, draw your wand and fire on a first year. You want to follow your father so badly, then that's a sure way to achieve it. Harry would certainly come after you for attacking someone on a Potter scholarship. If a Slytherin earning one of those doesn't tell you things have changed, then Harry was right. You are stupid. Theo then dragged his sister out of there. He knew Pauline was right, but Harry wasn't actually there at the moment, and Flint might just decide to risk drawing his wand. The large Slytherin wasn't forced to repeat a year because he was clever. That the 4 surviving attackers were found guilty and then sentenced to death was what everyone expected. The Daily Prophet reporting Goyle Sr.'s last words was not. Gregory was distraught as his friends led him from the hall. Slughorn rose to follow, but Augusta stopped him. His friends will look after him. They know exactly how he's feeling, since a few of them have already suffered similar bereavements. Penny is also following the group out the door. She'll see he gets to Madame Pomfrey if he needs to. If you think that is best, Madame Longbottom. Her head of Slytherin's tone clearly indicated he thought she was wrong, but Augusta wasn't for budging. I do, Professor. We make ourselves available if they should need us, but I think this will work best in the long run. Gregory will be far more likely to open up to his friends than any member of staff, especially since Draco and Pansy have experienced the same loss recently. The bonds of friendship will help him heal far better than any member of staff sitting down to chat to the lad. She knew Sluggy was desperate for a way into Harry's company and was practically courting Draco Malfoy. Augusta just didn't want to give him any opportunities to make inroads. The fact that Slughorn was a superb potions teacher was the only reason he was still in the castle. She found his behavior of trying to befriend the influential students distasteful. That her grandson was one of those students and had told him where to go from day one was particularly pleasing, though. They watched with heavy hearts from the Ravenclaw table while Gregory was led from the hall, their breakfast being forgotten. Harry was basically thinking out loud while sitting with his friends. There are bound to be some families that can't afford to send their children back to Hogwarts after the summer. I think the Potter Scholarship program is going to have to expand to cover that. This earned him a gentle kiss from his mate before Hermione added to his idea. You might want to speak to Sirius about the Malfoys too. They are denied access to their vaults, but just took on a load of house guests. They were already hurting for money. This time it was Harry's turn to give Hermione a quick kiss in thanks. Some of their friends had been watching this, and it was Morag who summed up most of their feelings on the matter. Their parents attack you, and now you're thinking of paying for their way through Hogwarts? I'm sorry, Harry. I just don't get it. It's really simple, Morag. They are not their parents. The best way to stop them embracing the same views and beliefs that saw their parents become Death Eaters is to let them see there is another way. We need to drag bigotry kicking and screaming from the shadows and shine a light on it so everyone can clearly see what it is. Once you do that, no sensible person can support the unsupportable. Are you saying we're all the same, Harry? Exactly the opposite, Cho. We are all different, each and every one of us. What I'm hoping for is that we can learn to embrace those differences, not claim one particular difference makes us better than everyone else. If that can be achieved, then things like Susan and Amelia's party being attacked will never happen again. If me spending some gold to keep students in a school that teaches this is the cost, then it's a cost I'm willing to pay. Oh, Hermione, there just might be a diplomat in there after all. Well said, Harry. I would embrace you, but my Neville is the jealous type. Padma was wearing a wide smile as said Neville made a show of embracing his mate. While her best friend's words had lessened the intensity, Hermione ramped it right back up again. Over the holidays we visited the goblins who are now living at Kingersea. It was wonderful watching the young goblins sledging down a snow-covered hill until Harry pointed out this was the first time they'd ever had the opportunity to do that. Yes, it was something I had never thought of before. But those youngsters were having as much fun sliding down that hill as I had when my mum and dad used to take me. Nearly as much fun as Harry and I had when I coaxed him onto a sledge. Coaxed? She pushed me down and then grabbed me from behind. Hermione's finger on his lips stopped him saying any more. She wanted to finish what she started. I'm going to have a baby brother this summer, and we already know he's a wizard. I want my brother to grow up being comfortable playing with other children of a similar age. Whether those children are goblins, muggles, or wizards won't matter to him, unless someone tells him differently. I sat in a goblin home with a little goblin girl on my knee, and we chatted away. All I saw was a little girl excited because she had been out playing with her friends in the snow. You could have heard a pin drop as there were now more than just Ravenclaws hanging on Hermione's every word. That image will keep me going when Professor Weasley pushes us to our limits, or when Mad Eye pushes us past them. That is why we train so hard, that is worth fighting for. A hand gently settled on Hermione's shoulder, indicating just how much everyone had been wrapped up in her words. Not even Harry had noticed Master Pitsley enter the Great Hall. Very well said, Miss Granger. So well said I will overlook your tardiness, but just this once. This got everyone moving. Keeping Master Pitsley waiting was not a good idea. They were soon all hurrying along to their potions lesson. Ron watched cluelessly as Ginny wasn't the only person wiping her eyes after listening to that. He hadn't understood a bloody word. Instead of saying this out loud, though, the youngest Weasley boy decided to get some help. He had a quiet word with Percy. Why did Granger's story about having a goblin on her knee affect everyone? Does she expect Crow to give her a goblin child, or is she sorry because he can't? Nothing like that, Ron. Hermione used the situation as a metaphor to describe what she would like to see happen. That, if you take away the bigotry, the situation would become normal enough that people wouldn't even comment on it. You mean like having a goblin at the Merlin ball and no one said anything? Fred and George even danced with her. If you could call that dancing. Yes, Ron, that's exactly right. Even going back to just my first year at Hogwarts, something like that would have been unthinkable, never mind allowed to happen. It was a thoughtful Ron who walked down to the dungeons for potions with Slughorn. That it was no longer Snape was just one of the changes he'd been taking for granted. Defense was so much better now. While no one slept in History of Magic anymore, McGonagall's class was different too. His year had seen all the changes happen, but for someone like Percy, who had been here since BC, before Crow, the changes must be remarkable. The change in Mad Eye was frightening, and he wasn't holding anything back. You should never have charged those Death Eaters. You were ordered to stay put and provide cover in fire. Their tutor's attention then switched from Hermione to Harry. You're a centurion. What would you do if a warrior under your command broke one of your orders? Hermione is neither a warrior nor under my command. She is my mate, and sees her place as by my side. Why do you think she's here bursting a gut every week in training so she can sit at home and bake cakes while I go off to fight? Without a command structure, you've already lost. That's what happened to the Death Eaters. That was a step too far for Harry. Do not compare us to Death Eaters. Okay, you want to play it that way then? Let's get busy. I'll break you both of this habit. Moody was stopped by Neville and Padma standing beside their friends. Miss Patil was not a happy witch. If you're going to punish them, then you need to include us too. It was only the fact Harry can run faster than us that stopped Neville and I charging right beside these two. If that's the way you want it, Missy, then let's go. 2 hours of grueling and punishing work later, the shout of stop was really welcome, except for Mad Eye. There was more than his eye mad at the unwanted interruption. Just what do you think you're playing at, Tonks? They're mine for almost another hour. Get yourself out of here and never interrupt my training session again. The young Aurora was so angry, she had her wand in Mad Eye's face. If you think they have another hour left in them, then you are off your head. I know they don't have another hour in them. I intend to break them and then start rebuilding the 4 of them into... Stop right there. You're talking about breaking 3 13 and 1 14-year-old. You've fucking lost the plot, Mad Eye. So much so that the Lady Ravenclaw was worried and came to get me. Take a good look at what you've done here. The instant Tonks had yelled stop, Hermione, Padma, and Neville had sank to the floor. Harry was also done in, but just wouldn't give Moody the satisfaction of seeing him beat. The gaze he was directing at his tutor, though, was pure hatred. Hatred for what Moody had put his mate and 2 best friends through. You're leaving now, Mad Eye. And don't test me on this. You've been working hard for 2 hours while I'm still fresh. I'm also willing to bet Hogwarts will assist me inside this room. You want to take me on? The battle-scarred old Aura could see how serious Tonks was. There was no way she would back down. If he challenged her here and now, things could easily get out of hand. He decided to retreat, but Tonks wasn't finished. I will be contacting Barchoke and Bones over this. I would also advise you to stay out of Augusta's way for a while too. As Moody left the room, the door quickly disappeared, denying him the chance to re-enter. Harry shuffled over to where Hermione lay, sinking down beside his mate before gently lifting her head onto his lap. Harry, no more, love. That's the end of Moody. The man is just too much of a fanatic for my liking. What's the point of destroying Voldemort if we also have to destroy what we have between us to achieve our goal? That price is too high. I didn't chew you out that night because, in the same situation, nothing would have kept me from your side. If I want you to be an equal partner, then I have to take the good with the bad. If that means you are facing the same danger as me, then that's how it has to be. The room slowly changed around them. A bed grew out of the floor right under the couple. Harry glanced over to see the exact same thing happening to Padma and Neville, forcing Tonks to take a step back as she was casting scans on the couple. The Aura then approached their bed. Those two are physically and magically exhausted. I suspect you both are the same. Moody really put you through the mill today. Man's a maniac. Hermione's comment was no more than a mumble. She was exhausted, lying in Harry's arms on a very comfortable bed. The knackered young witch couldn't keep her eyes open. Harry was gently running his fingers through her hair, trying to put into words how he felt. They wouldn't quit. They were dead on their feet, but still wouldn't quit. I should have stopped it. Harry, I almost wet myself pulling my wand on Moody. He's a legend at the Ministry and has been doing this since well before I was born. Mad Eye knows exactly what buttons to push to get people to do what he wants. Stop beating yourself up and just rest, Harry. I'm not going anywhere. An armchair and an occasional table with a tea set already on it appeared. Tonks made herself comfortable as she settled down to wait on them wakening. It was some time later a door appeared in the wall. Tonks was reaching for her wand before realizing she didn't need it. Hogwarts would never let anyone enter who meant them harm. Parvati and Luna would certainly never do that. What happened to them? They're exhausted, Parvati. Nothing more. Moody forgot he was dealing with 4 people barely into their teens. They may act a lot older, but their bodies just can't take the punishment he was dishing out. Shouldn't you be in class? It's dinner time. They missed it, and we were worried. Another pair of chairs appeared, as did a table with dinner for the 3 of them. Both girls checked the couples, sleeping on the beds before sitting down to eat. Hogwarts will look after them when they wake. She always looks after her champion and his friends. Parvati knew Luna was right. There was something else to be taken into consideration, though. I hope she's ready to deal with Padma's anger. Her first time sleeping in a bed with Neville, and they're both too exhausted to even know about it. Far less enjoy it. Moody wasn't enjoying Amelia's anger. She was ripping him a new one as he tried to justify his actions. They were questioning my authority. You know what needs to be done then. I taught you the drill. What you fail to realize, Alistair, is that you have no authority over them. Between being a Baron, Order of Merlin, first-class holder and a Centurion, Harry probably outranks you. That aside, you forgot you were basically dealing with children. Had you treated my Susan like that, you would currently be missing your balls. Augusta Longbottom might still castrate you next time you meet. Those four have just slept for over 15 hours straight after Tonks stopped your lesson. She should never have interrupted. You still don't get it, do you? Those four are exceptional students because they share bonds that go beyond friendship. I saw Padma as an 11-year-old after she'd stepped in front of Hermione and deliberately taken a curse to the face to protect her friend. We all watched Tonks' memory of the chamber. These kids would literally die for each other. She was struggling to make the Master Aura see his mistake. That she was losing her temper didn't help. That the two couples are blood-bonded only exacerbates the problem. You saw their greatest strength as a weakness and tried to break them out of it. Harry would kill you before he would allow that to happen. I don't care what the fucking book says about this situation. We're throwing the book away on this one. It was never written with these four in mind anyway. Children their age aren't supposed to be able to do the things they can. I'm guessing there won't be a lesson today then. They won't be taking any lessons today? Remus has already excused them from his class this afternoon. That should hopefully give them enough time to recover for Friday's classes. I haven't officially heard that your services won't be required next week, but I'm pretty certain that will be the case. I still had quite a few things I wanted to teach them. I could pass it on to young Weasley. I suppose he's still going to be teaching them. Barchoke will want to contact the Patils and Longbottoms before taking any action. I'm expecting Alice to be on the flu shortly. Moody took that as his cue to leave. Rookwood knew they had to leave the tent. He'd been racking his brain while trying to think of what to do next, when his eidetic memory pulled out something that had crossed his desk, not long after he'd started working at the Ministry. Around the turn of the century, the Muggles had built one of their lighthouses on Flannan Isles in the Outer Hebrides. Their fancy flashing light, though, attracted some unwelcome visitors. A pair of Hebridean blacks soon made short work of the 3 keepers left there to man the lighthouse. The magical reversal squad had eradicated all traces of what happened and then warded the island to stop any dragons returning, leaving the Muggles with nothing more than the mystery of their 3 disappearing keepers. What had jogged his memory was the report that the Muggles had automated the lighthouse, meaning the wards didn't need to be maintained. That's what it might have meant back in the 70s. Today it meant there was a warm, dry structure on an uninhabited island. A structure where they could live undiscovered and in relative comfort while planning their next move. It was time to approach his master with this idea. When Hermione spied who had arrived with Bill that Saturday morning, there was no stopping her. She was out of her seat and rushing to greet their unexpected visitor. Their friends had all seen this behavior before, but for the rest of the school, seeing a witch hug a goblin and refer to them as father was absolutely shocking. "It's good to see you too, my daughter. Are you 4 recovered?" "Yes, father. Moody worked us to exhaustion, but there was no other damage. Moody is a warrior, used to working with and training other warriors. In hindsight, it was a mistake to leave your extra training in his hands. That is one of the issues we need to discuss today." The 4 friends left with Barchoke and Bill, making their way up to the room Hogwarts provided. This time there were 2 large sofas facing each other, the room understanding that they needed to talk first. The goblin got the cart rolling. I spoke with Augusta and Amelia, both very much liked the idea of the students who couldn't afford Hogwarts next year receiving sponsorship. Both were very much against those sponsorships interfering with the Potter Scholarship program that is currently running so successfully. I suggested sponsorship from the Lily Potter Foundation, and they agreed. "What conditions would you like to set with these sponsorships?" As few as possible. Harry knew that controlling the purse strings gave them power over those who were granted the award. It was a power he didn't want hanging over the recipients' heads. We expect all the students to do their best, and any Hogwarts punishment of an agreed-upon severity sees their sponsorship getting reviewed. I don't want to have anything to do with setting the level of severity, and certainly won't have any input into the review procedure. How about Augusta, you and Draco's mum on the panel? That keeps everything separate from the scholarships yet still has a fair balance. If you counted Barchoke and Narcissa Malfoy as the opposite ends of the spectrum, then the panel was reasonably fair. Bill, though, could sense there was really more going on here than was being said. Harry, why are you pushing this so hard? Edmund Parkinson barred his daughter from the Parkinson family for her own protection. That's not something the prophet just surmised. That left Pansy without a name, but Draco immediately claimed her. The Malfoys, though, won't have the gold to send Pansy to Hogwarts for the remainder of her years here. With this scheme up and running, it gives Draco the option of accepting a sponsorship for Pansy, or borrowing the gold from Elspeth Parkinson. The four of us already know what Draco will choose. Neville quickly agreed. He would choose the sponsorship rather than be beholden to his mate's former family. While Draco knows why Edmund did what he had to, accepting Parkinson gold to put Pansy through Hogwarts would be adding insult to injury. This left Hermione comically shaking her head. Pure bloods and goblins. One day I might figure out which set of politics is crazier. Her mate joked right back at her. Oh, and having a head of the country who's not really the head but everyone still bows to, isn't crazy. The Muggles have a queen who rules over the country, but can't say anything unless her government tells her to. Now that's just plain crazy. Padma and Neville were waiting on the punchline. When it never came, they had to agree with Harry on this one. Barchoke got the meeting back on track. After Amelia and the Longbottoms had calmed down somewhat, all admitted the problem with Moody should have been foreseen. He trained Amelia, Alice and Frank, so they were well aware of his methods. I can't really have my assistant ambassador spending 4 days a week at Hogwarts, so Amelia is going to provide a senior ruler starting next Wednesday. He's actually going to come tomorrow and watch your session with the 4 boys, give him some kind of idea what level to pitch your training at. Harry knew what he was about to say would be controversial, but still felt he needed to mention it. If we're serious about taking down Voldemort, then Master Auror Moody has knowledge we really need. I don't think any of us can dispute that. It's just his methods of imparting that knowledge we object to. His mate was learning not to charge blazing into an argument before checking her facts. Hermione held her temper as she questioned what Harry was proposing. Just what are you suggesting? I really don't think he's going to change the way he teaches, and I'm certainly not prepared to be worked into the ground every time he feels the need to prove a point. I know he was right, just as I know I'll probably do the exact same thing again when you're in danger. Having me practically dying on my feet as a form of punishment isn't going to change that. After having said her piece, Hermione then gave them some information she hadn't mentioned before. From the slight depression Tonks and I were standing in, neither of us would have been able to provide covering fire for the last half of your charge. We were too low down for our curses to pass over the warriors and still hit the Death Eaters. This news upset her best friend. Why didn't you say so to Mad Eye? That sounds like good tactical reasoning to me, something he was always shouting at us about. Sorry, Padma, it might have prevented what happened the other day, but it just sounded like an excuse to me. We all know I was going to charge along with Harry, so I accepted the criticism. It's Moody's idea of punishment that I have a problem with. Harry had his arm round Hermione as he offered a compromise to the group. What if we had a lesson from Master Auror Moody once a month, with Auror Tonks in the room with us? Would that be something we could give a try? The steadying influence of the quartet offered his opinion. We know Tonks will look out for us. She'll certainly curb Moody's more fanatical tendencies. I like the idea, but could we treat it a month at a time? Let's have another lesson at the end of January and see how that goes before mentioning February. Neville's idea found agreement amongst the group. They were in effect only committing themselves to one more lesson, and Tonks would be there with them. They certainly trusted her far more than they did Mad Eye. Barchoke had one more bit of news for them before heading off to meet with Augusta. They wanted the sponsorship deal launched as quickly as possible, despite not imposing major conditions to the sponsorship. Anyone of students that qualified would know this life-changing finance could just as easily be withdrawn. They wouldn't be slow in passing that information on to their children currently inside the castle. That should help ease the tension currently felt in Hogwarts, as some students didn't know if they would be returning to the castle come September. The goblin's smile told everyone what he had to say was good news. The director really couldn't be more pleased with the way things unfolded that night. Pictures of wizards, witches and warriors fighting side by side against a common foe has electrified the nation. The squad commander's memory of the event makes for compulsive viewing. That our side survived unscathed while our enemies were crushed, could see songs written about that battle. There will be awards presented by a very grateful nation to all those goblins and friends of the nation who took part that night. I would like to do something for the warriors who protected Hermione. Already done, son. I sent the squad 2 kegs of the finest grog I could find for looking after our girl. You might actually find yourself seeing another girl soon. This news has generated a flood of applications from goblins wishing to come and work in Britain. Goldskin was one of them. Sapphire's coming home? It certainly looks that way. I think you'll have a visitor over the summer. She loved her time in Kinnersey last year. Hermione was as excited about that news as her mate. She's welcome any time. We all know our holidays abroad this summer are dependent on the Granger and Black babies, but with the new pool going in at the house, we can still have a lot of fun there. Barchoke didn't think he could be prouder of his daughter than she would say or do something to prove him wrong. Master Pitsley had her comments from Hogwarts all over Gringotts, pleasing the director no end. Now she was proposing to swim in the same pool as a goblin and treating the event as nothing special. Was it any wonder their nation had taken this witch to their hearts? With that settled, the goblin left to see Augusta and allow them to get on with their lesson. Sunday's lesson saw them being joined by their potential new tutor, Senior Aura Shacklebolt. All 4 thought he was a colorful character. That color appeared to be emphasized more by the fact his skin was as black as Hermione's. Familiar. The rich color and ethnic design of his robes were obviously African in origin, as was the brimless hat that was perched on his head. His earring had Neville once more thinking it would be cool to have the same done. Bill Weasley had one too. The Aura's voice was deep but warm and friendly. There was no dramatic entrance from Shacklebolt. While Kingsley was amazed at the room they would be training in, he was astonished at what these students could accomplish. The 4 older boys would easily ace their OKWLs this summer, yet still got their asses handed to them by the 4 younger students he was now going to train. The director had told him exactly why Mad Eye was no longer teaching these 4, and just by observing them during the lesson, Kingsley knew Madam Bones was spot on. They reminded him of auras who had been partners for years, appearing to know what the others were going to do in any given situation, and also trusting them implicitly. This was something that should certainly be nurtured and encouraged, not ripped apart to establish a command structure they didn't seem to need. He had been in the chamber when they'd shown Tonk's memory of that fight against the basilisk that had impressed the hell out of him. Kingsley knew he could have handpicked any 3 auras, and dropping them into the same situation, they would have struggled to do as well as these 4 teens against that giant creature. That they weren't even teens at the time just made the entire incident all the more remarkable. Training these 4 was something that was going to be a challenge. It was a challenge Kingsley was looking forward to. Crow's Marauders were enjoying their dueling challenge. They were in teams of 4 and using everything they had learned so far to try and defeat their opponents. They had established the 4 top teams on the night when Harry called a halt and had them sit. Normally, as you all know, we would play the duels out to a finish tonight. We've had a request though, a request we're now going to put to you. There has been an apprehensive atmosphere developing throughout the castle ever since we all returned from the Christmas holidays. It's hoped we can perhaps lift that spirit, and also help satisfy some curiosity about what we do here every week. The proposition is that the semi-finals and then the 2 winners fight it out in front of the school on Friday night. What do you think? The questions came thick and fast, and all were answered. The fights would be in this room, with the terrain similar to what they were used to dealing with. All the usual rules would apply, and the first years would be given the same offer tomorrow night. The clincher, though, was when Sirius mentioned that the 4 trainers from Crow's Marauders would be taking on the quartet of 5th-year trainers from the other Marauders. Who would want to miss that? Harry, though, had a final warning for the 4 teams who had just agreed to compete in front of the entire school. I expect everyone to do their best on Friday. What I don't want is the fact that there will be an audience watching to affect how you behave. We've done this often enough to know that 3 of the teams must lose, and the winners will be gracious to their opponents. All quickly agreed to that. Boasting usually saw you getting your ass kicked the following week. The teams were constantly shuffled to stop any rivalries developing and any one team dominating. The 4 teams that would be competing on Friday all knew they had a chance. It was no accident they were evenly matched. News like that was never going to be kept quiet by breakfast time. The entire castle knew about it, since each house had at least 3 second years involved, with the first years being determined tonight. All were looking forward to Friday. Any pressure the older students tried to put on their young housemates was instantly rebuffed. There was no house honor at stake here since the teams were all mixed. Roger, though, was taking a bit of good-natured ribbing at the Ravenclaw table. "Aren't you worried that the whole school is going to see you getting your ass kicked?" "Oh, I'd hate to be in your shoes." He wasn't bothered in the slightest. "Can I just point out that these 4 defeated a basilisk and kicked Voldemort's ass again? Then there's the fact that my extra training and the experience gained from fighting against 4 orders of Merlin first-class holders should stand me in excellent stead for my defense practical exams in May. If we get beaten on Friday, it won't be the first time, nor the last, but we're learning more and more all the time. I'm actually more worried about our Marauders. Imagine having to perform with the whole school watching when you're still in first year. Now that is pressure." The first-year Ravenclaws very quickly confirmed they were looking forward to it. Their friends always shouted encouragement every time they fought anyway. They were learning to tune that out and concentrate on what they needed to do. Dinner that Friday certainly saw an improved atmosphere inside the castle. The school was buzzing with excitement. Augusta had actually invited Amelia to dinner and, of course, to see the fights. The director of magical law enforcement was looking forward to watching the young students perform. She was also looking forward to seeing Susan work with them. Apart from the 2 club staff sponsors, the students would actually be running the entire event tonight. It was 2 other students, though, who caught Minerva's eye. There were some members of staff who thought she'd lost her mind by giving Fred and George Weasley prefect badges. Minerva was certainly enjoying proving them wrong on all counts. The twins were idolized by her first-year lions, and school discipline had never been better. She would also freely admit Cedric and Roger enjoyed the same status in their own houses, and were doing just as good a job. The difference was, though, that neither of them came with the previous baggage that the Weasley twins did. Ever since they started taking potions lessons from Master Pitsley, both had turned over a new leaf and blasted through their potions OKWLs with outstandings, a whole year early too. Minerva had seen them work with Crow's Marauders last year. She was really looking forward to what was going to happen tonight. The entire school was in for a treat and appeared to know that the atmosphere inside the hall was similar to that before a Quidditch match, except there were no house rivalries to spoil anyone's enjoyment. Their house might not win, but they wouldn't be beaten either. The room opened to a large space in the middle, surrounded on every side by spectator grandstands. There were seats set aside for each year's Marauders at opposite ends of the open space, and that's where the teams who would be competing headed, along with their tutors and staff sponsor. As the first years were opening the event, Crow's Marauders got to sit and watch the first bout before they would need to get ready. When their lesson got to the semi-final stage, each pair of tutors would take responsibility for one of the 4 teams. They would carry out the safety checks while discussing tactics before the fight. Afterwards, win or lose, they would sit and go over what worked and what went wrong. Harry watched as Cedric and Morag got their team of 4 ready to compete, delighted to see Natalie in the team. They would be facing off against a team mentored by George and Draco, a daunting prospect. As each team took to opposite ends of the open area, the room as usual came into play. The floor shifted to become a terrain that each team only had 30 seconds to form their tactics around before the fight would start. Henrika had been explaining every move to their captivated audience, even the need for the dueling robes and protective headgear. The idea was to help the students learn how to fight, not to get them injured. That each team of first years now stood there trying to adapt the plans they had made with their mentors to the new situation impressed those watching before a spell was cast. Their staff sponsor explaining that the room would alter the setup differently for every fight, and they had no idea what they would be facing, was also an impressive piece of magic on Hogwarts' part. The arena had a scattering of large boulders and parts of walls here and there. When Henrika called fight, all 8 students competing dived for cover before firing a spell. Trying a rush too far saw one of George Draco's team hit with 2 of 3 spells fired right from the off. The accuracy needed to do that was not lost on the now captivated audience. The second those teams stepped forward to compete, they were on their own. This was to try and get them to think for themselves. Now having a numerical advantage, saw Cedric Morig's team take the initiative. 3 members would be firing while the 4th made their way forward to the next piece of cover. They would then open up at a target and allow another member of the team freedom to move to a better position. The trio knew if they didn't act soon they would be outflanked and then picked off. In a hastily planned move, one of them made a dash for another piece of cover. This move drew all 4 of their opponents' wands, just as they'd hoped. The remaining 2 members of the team stood and took aim at those firing at the easier target, both hitting their mark. As the decoy's shield withstood 4 hits before succumbing, the teams were now locked at 2 apiece. The crowd were now loving this. Yes, the spells being cast weren't really powerful, but they had never expected that from first years. The accuracy of those spells and the whole tactical side of the contest was enthralling. Considering their favorite games were Quidditch and wizarding chess, seeing the tactical side of this battle was something the audience really appreciated. Natalie found herself alone when her remaining teammate got hit on his protective headgear when trying to get a spell off of his own. She fought on bravely, managing to take out one of her foes before getting hit herself. Those hit during the fight knew to stay down until the contest was over. The arena once more becoming a flat floor was the signal for that, a signal that was greeted with tumultuous applause. Emilia was sitting between Minerva and Augusta while trying to put what she'd just witnessed into context. Now I understand why every one of those students stood ready that night. If this is what the first years are capable of, I can hardly wait to see the older students perform. This had Augusta smiling at her old friend. You know the best part? Their mentors are now sitting down with them and going over every move they made. They'll be accentuating the positive while highlighting their mistakes, all in the hope of making sure those mistakes get less and less. They do this at the end of every lesson, and that's just how they're treating tonight. As the second semi-final got underway, the first 2 teams from Crow's Marauders were getting prepared for their bout. Harry Daphne's team were up against the one being mentored by Padma Terry. Harry had Ginny in their team and she'd managed to control her blush any time she was near him. It was soon back though when Harry asked who was the leader and the other 3 all looked at the redhead. Remember, your minds are your best weapons. Trying for too much from the off almost cost that last team the match. Only their inexperience saw all 4 falling for that move, something that won't happen again if their tutors have anything to say about it. Just play to your strengths and keep doing the things that got you this far. The cheering indicated the second match was over, with the team being mentored by Roger and Hannah making it through. Harry was pleased to see there was little celebrating amongst the contestants. They helped each other off the floor and headed for their mentors to talk the fight over. Sirius then came forward to address the crowd. I don't know about anyone else sitting here, but I certainly couldn't fight like that when I was in first year. This was met with a roar of approval and applause for those who had just fought. Now, things are slightly different for the second years. They have an extra year of magical growth and training under their belts, therefore they are expected to dodge or shield more. Their arenas will usually have a lot less cover. making any that is there all the more valuable. Teams, to your marks. Your 30 seconds will start after the room reveals its form. Occasionally the room's form would dictate the tactics required. This was one such time. Apart from a few large boulders, a section of wall in the middle of the space dominated the fighting arena. When time was called, Padma Terry's team all raced toward the wall. Ginny and one of their team headed left, while the other two broke right. By the time the four reached the wall, they realized what the other team was up to and opened fire with everything they had. They managed to bring down one member before finding themselves outflanked. The wall that had seemed such an advantage beforehand was now a liability. Their movement was severely restricted as they were stuck with it at their backs. The team of three were utilizing whatever cover was available while they poured spells into the group with their backs against the wall. Ginny's team eventually won, but even then it was close. They had last man standing though, which, under the rules they were fighting with, saw them through to the final. Again the applause was thunderous, and again there was a lot on display to earn that applause. Their movement rate of casting and accuracy of those same spells was unbelievable for second years. Amelia couldn't think when the future of their community had ever looked brighter. Here were children from all four houses working together to overcome problems they had been set. That this was a voluntary club with a 100% attendance from their targeted students, just made this all the more remarkable. She watched as Susan and Neville got their team ready to compete, and then cheered as loud as anyone when their team won. Henrika then stepped forward and once more restored order. Our first years are just as excited as you after watching that last match. They are now all thinking that will be them this time next year and can't wait. Calling the two teams competing in the final to their marks, she started the 30-second countdown as the room revealed its form. The final was cheered from the first spell cast right up until the last, and the entire school were on their feet by then. The winning team received slabs of Honeyduke's finest chocolate, and no one missed that. After a quick chat with their mentors, the chocolate was shared around as the 16 looked forward to the second-year final. But the team Susan, along with Neville, had been mentoring won their final saw. Amelia shouting like a first year whose house had just won the Quidditch Cup. She was immensely proud of her niece and could easily see the confidence she was gaining from this. Susan had told her the aim was they would have a Marauders Club of their own this September, and Amelia wholeheartedly approved of that. She was now thinking the Marauders Clubs were playing an even more pivotal role in making Hogwarts a school to be proud of than the Potter scholarships. It would be fair to say that the next match was the one they had all been waiting on. This in no way diminished their appreciation or enjoyment of what had gone before. It was just the audience expected this fight to be in a different league. Having witnessed Harry fight in the pit against four opponents, Amelia already knew he was in a league all of his own. It would be the other three the focus of her attention would be on tonight. As usual, it was Fred and George who came up with a plan. Since neither Cedric or Roger had anything better, they decided to give it a try. Their arena, as expected, had very little cover. When Sirius called fight, all four cast the Starburst charm. They had their eyes tightly closed as they cast. On opening them a few seconds later, they saw nothing. That wasn't quite true. They could see the arena, and also that the dueling shield had turned opaque for a few seconds to protect the spectators. It was just their opponents who were nowhere in sight. Oh shit, it's hard enough to fight these four when we can see them. Any more bright ideas? That Roger had slipped into sarcasm mode, told the other three he was worried. As they all felt the same, it really wasn't necessary to decipher his mood. Cedric cast a Clemente and began spraying water everywhere. The other three soon followed his lead. Water sprayed off a disillusioned figure, and the spells were soon raining down on a now wet Padma. She was shielding and dodging the spells from Fred and George, while Cedric and Roger prepared themselves for the intervention of the other three. They didn't have long to wait. Neville and Hermione had gotten so close to both Weasleys that there was no time for them to react to their stunners, other than to fall unconscious on the wet floor. Harry had engaged Cedric and Roger, stopping them from interfering in the takedown of the twins. The pair of prefects were now outnumbered when the other three switched their attention in their direction. Ravenclaw may have just watched Roger being handed his arse, although were honest enough to admit they couldn't have done any better or even as well. His defenses were awesome, but after Cedric fell, the outcome was inevitable. The quartet of third years were relentless and moved as one. Their accuracy, speed of casting and sheer power behind those spells appeared easily Makey level. The team of prefects never really had a chance. All four were revived and realized the noise wasn't anything to do with lingering spell damage. The spectators were cheering like mad. The teams shook hands, and Harry had a quiet word. "Thanks, guys. Seeing that should discourage any disgruntled students who were thinking about having a go at us. Does anyone else feel we've just been used like dueling dummies?" "That's because you are a dummy. I told you that idea wouldn't work." "My idea. It was you who came up with it." The twins felt a hand settle on each of their shoulders. "Don't worry about it, guys. The Halloween of their second year they took down Mooney and me. You're in good company. Speaking of which, he's going to take over from Henrika as your staff sponsor at the end of the month. I don't want her overdoing it. She wants to teach as long as possible, but there aren't usually spells flying about in her history class. All would be sorry to see her stop, but they understood Sirius's reasoning behind it. Remus was also a very capable understudy. Fred now had a gleam in his eye. We now have both sets of Marauders, with an original Marauder as a staff sponsor. Cool. As the spectators left the room, the entire school knew the evening had been a great success. Even Flint understood the message this demonstration had just given out. There was now not a hope in hell of him being able to recruit anyone inside Hogwarts to extract retribution for what happened at New Year. That was a very powerful back-off everyone had just witnessed. The Grand Hall in Gringotts was packed to capacity with people wanting to witness the awards ceremony. Only the first couple of rows were still waiting to be filled, and those seats were reserved for family. They had brought Parvati and Luna with them from Hogwarts, meeting their families in an anteroom that also held the warriors and their families too. After his hugs from Emma, Smeeta and Alice, Harry made a point of approaching every warrior and thanking them for their assistance that night. All knew what was really being said, and while the warriors didn't think it was necessary, they appreciated the gesture. Bochoke then arrived with a young female goblin, who proceeded to attempt to hug all 6 of her friends at the same time. Seeing this for themselves meant more to the warriors than their centurion's thanks. Here was something worth fighting for, a young goblin being treated as an equal by her witch and wizard peers. That this was then followed by the centurion's mate embracing Ambassador Bochoke and calling him father, had them standing proud that they had protected this extraordinary witch that night, as she fought alongside them. All the families were soon led away to fill those reserved seats at the front of the hall. The trio of friends had been unsure how to dress for this occasion. Harry was of course in his centurion dress uniform. Bochoke had suggested their dueling robes, since they were receiving an award for bravery in battle. All 4 were required to wear their Orders of Merlin first class, and had them clearly displayed. The entire group then followed the director and his entourage into the Grand Hall. Over 1,000 people greeted them with applause and much banging of weapons on shields from the warrior guards. Harry had asked that the warriors be the main focus of the ceremony, so he followed them in, with Hermione on his arm and Neville, with Padma also on her mate's arm, right behind them. The director now addressed the audience. "We are all here today to partake in a ceremony that hasn't been seen inside the London branch of Gringotts for generations. To be awarded for bravery in battle is a great honor. I want you to witness the squad commander's memory of this event and see for yourselves that these awards were truly earned." Harry's attention immediately switched to his family. They had no idea this was going to happen, and he was worried about Emma's reaction to watching it. Dan was already holding her hand, and Luna silently took her other one. Sapphire had Luna's spare hand and reached out for Parvati. In a matter of seconds, all of the family were joining hands, determined to face this ordeal together. They knew what they had faced inside Bones Manor, but here they were going to witness what their children, siblings or best friends had to deal with. Every goblin had weapons training and studied at least basic tactics on how best to use those weapons. All could immediately see the trouble their squad of warriors had portkeyed into. They were faced with a group of at least equal size, but the enemy had a longer reach and were behind cover, handing them a huge advantage that many warriors would perish in trying to overturn. Then, out of nowhere, a very powerful spell blasted the enemy's leader deep into the woods as a command rang out loud and clear into the night. "Warriors to me! Warriors to me!" The roar that came from 1,000 throats was a pure organic outcry of relief and joy as their centurion led the charge while pouring spells into the enemy. That his mate and aura guard were mere seconds behind started to swing the battle back more in their favor. There was also a large outswelling of pride as the warriors acted as one unit and swallowed both females up to offer them protection. Neither which let this maneuver affect the rate at which they continued to fire spells into the enemy ranks. Harry cringed as the 3 killing curses were zooming toward him in the memory. This was accompanied by screams that were distinctly female and certainly human in origin. He knew there would be questions on that to be answered later. The battle was still delicately balanced until spells started flying over the warriors' heads. Turning, the squad commander's memory showed Neville and Padma running as fast as they could while pouring spells into their foe. Both now ran every morning and were easily outstripping the other members of their company as they charged to aid their friends. The cheering reached a new level of intensity as all watching could now see the battle had just swung in their favor. When half their enemy then disappeared, it soon became a slaughter. The memory showed Centurion Crow jumping into the woods with his blades flashing before the group commander had to concentrate on his own fight. His shield knocked the wand aside before his battle axe sliced right through the arm and also the Death Eater's leg. The warrior spun around looking for more foes, but the battle was already over. He shouted orders to establish a perimeter, and the memory ended with the warriors cheering the 4 teenagers holding onto each other in the middle of the carnage. The director let the crowd go. He knew the spectators would need to get this out their systems before he could hope to proceed with the ceremony. The group awaiting their awards were standing in a column that stretched halfway back up the aisle. They were now the focus for all the cheering and jubilation. Ragnarok eventually raised his battle axe and there was silence once more. "As our customs dictate, I must now ask everyone present if they would like to challenge any of these awards." The silence this time was total. A mark of respect to those about to be honored here today. As Ragnarok lowered his great axe, cheers once more rang out. Only when 4 centurions made their way forward with the awards did the celebrations halt. For now, the warriors stepped forward in pairs to have the director attach their awards to their tunics before splitting alternatively right or left. The 4 friends eventually found themselves wearing their new awards in the middle of the line of warriors, the twinkle in Ragnarok's eye telling them he had more to say. The battle was ours that night because everyone played their part. That is why the decision was taken to make all these awards the same. I feel I must point out, though, that not only are the 4 teenagers here the youngest ever recipients of this award, they are the only 4 people in history ever to hold this award along with their Orders of Merlin. First class. Their intervention that night was the reason our victory was such a resounding one, and for that they have my and the nation's gratitude. This resulted in even louder cheering before Ragnarok led them out to the real celebration, a massive party in honor of the 24 heroes. Harry found himself surrounded by witches and a female goblin, all who had tears in their eyes. He was relieved to see Emma wasn't upset, but that relief was short-lived. "Okay, I'm obviously missing something here. Why is everyone so upset with that memory?" It was left to Smeeta to answer Emma's question. "Those green spells were the killing curse. You can't shield against it, and if it hits any part of your body, the curse lives up to its name. You're dead. Only one person has ever been hit with it and lived. He was only a baby at the time. Harry, we all saw that curse hit. How are you standing here?" "It hit my shield, Luna. The curse shattered it and nearly broke my arm, but that was all." Emma was now fiercely hugging Harry, glad she didn't know that fact when she watched the memory. It was Barchoke who rescued his son. "We're here for a party, and to celebrate we're all still here and able to party. You have my assurance no Death Eaters will be crashing into this one." As usual, it was Padma who summed the situation up rather well. There are hardly enough Death Eaters left to pull a Christmas cracker. I don't think they'll be crashing any parties again for a long time. The image of that tent Voldemort had been living in appearing on the front page of the Prophet had totally destroyed what little credibility he had left amongst his pure-blood supporters, not even the poorest of whom would ever consider a piece of canvas manufactured by Muggles to be suitable accommodation. The small accommodation block attached to the lighthouse was perfect for their needs. A few cleaning and repair charms soon had the place not only livable but comfortable. An abundance of rabbits and a sea full of fish also ensured they wouldn't go hungry. Their master's leg was recovering, but he would be left with a limp until they could get their hands on a healer and the appropriate potions. Not everything was going so smoothly, though. Bella's temper appeared to be growing to match her now expanding waistline. What was the point of escaping one island prison only to find ourselves virtually prisoners on another piece of rock? This wasn't what I had in mind when I agreed to leave Azkaban with you. Bella, this isn't a prison, it's our base of operations. From here we can plan how to make all those bastards pay for turning their backs on our master. What good is planning if we never do anything about it? This isn't a base, it's a hideout. We're hiding here like those frightened rabbits you're so fond of cooking. We need to strike back, make the bastards fear us again. They won't do that with us stuck here in the middle of bloody nowhere. They'll just forget all about us because we don't matter anymore. Even the dragons now leave this bit of rock alone. It's not worth their time. If they're smart enough to figure out there's bugger all of any worth here, why can't you? Voldemort limped into the room, and the argument, you are both correct. Augustus has provided us with a fine base from which to launch our attacks. Bella, you too are correct. We must respond or all is already lost. Our reaction must be big though, big, brutal, and strike right at their hearts. Otherwise, we will be relegated to the rulers of mere criminals. That is not something I am prepared to accept. The mere mention of striking back was enough to placate Bella's mood. Fear gripped Augustus, though, at his master's next words. Hogwarts traditionally holds its Hogsmeade weekends around the time of Valentine's Day. That will be our signal to strike. Master, forgive my interruption, but they will be expecting us then. And that is why we will strike. After all, it wouldn't do to disappoint them. Augustus knew that further argument would be putting his own life in danger. Their master had made his decision and nothing was going to change that. His mate, though, appeared ecstatic. Bella's hormones didn't have her craving unusual food in sickening combinations. That was far too tame for the former Mrs. Lestrange. She wanted to see blood spilt, with preferably her being the one who was doing the spilling. It was now apparent she was soon going to get that opportunity. Hermione was finding it hard to believe she could be sitting surrounded by friends and yet still feel a touch of loneliness. She knew exactly why that was, though. Harry was again patrolling Hogsmeade before the students headed down to the village after breakfast. With Voldemort once more on the loose, there would be no lunch with her mate either. Both he and Tonks had extra people under them, as everyone knew this would be a prime target over the weekend. The Ministry was caught between a rock and a hard place in that they insisted on calling the trio criminals, to then cancel a Hogsmeade weekend at Hogwarts, because there were 3 criminals on the loose sent all the wrong signals about whether the Ministry could protect the magical community. Their answer was to flood the village with auroras and goblin warriors. The top priority was to protect the students and keep the village safe. Should Voldemort, Lestrange and Rookwood attack, they would find themselves facing odds of over 30-1. She just missed having Harry beside her and had even considered staying in the castle with Luna. The rest of her friends were having none of that. Padma soon put her straight while they had walked down to the Great Hall for breakfast. Hermione, the village will be crawling with auras and warriors. No one will be sneaking off for any alone time as a couple. We will be staying in as big a group as possible, and I want you there. How else are you going to race to Harry's side if they do attack? After that, she really couldn't say no. She really couldn't miss Earjit either, as the beautiful white owl swooped down and gracefully landed right in front of her. Hello, girl. Is that for me? The owl was ready to give an indignant bark. Did this human think she would deliver something to the wrong person? The sight of that human reaching for a piece of bacon changed that indignation into a nod and a bark of delight. Hermione fed Urgit a rasher of bacon before removing her gift, a single red rose with a card that proclaimed "Missing you too." With a smile now back on her face, Roger just couldn't resist teasing. Even when Harry's not here, he still manages to make the rest of us look bad. He does know that Valentine's Day isn't until Monday. After the disaster in our first year, you can bet he knows when it is. This is just to say sorry because he's on duty all weekend. He is a centurion after all. Since he kicks our asses every week in our extra lesson, it's kinda hard to forget. Surely Voldemort won't be stupid enough to attack Hogsmeade over the weekend. That was Padma's cue to butt in. He was stupid enough to attack Amelia's New Year part. Okay, he didn't know there was a party being held there, but the same reasoning might apply here too. What if he doesn't know Hogsmeade is full of auroras and warriors? Hermione soon put a stop to that line of thought. Then he's in for a really big surprise, and it will be their last attack. Bella was concealed up in the hills around Hogwarts. Her mate had been insistent they shouldn't be surprised again. She couldn't really see a lot of detail, Augustus again insisting that she was far enough away that there would be no danger of her being detected. Her hand was resting on her growing midriff as she spoke. "Our big strong wizard worries so about us, little one. Your father is a good man, my son, not like that weak bastard I was forced to marry. He uses that beautiful mind of his to keep us safe. Today I'll need my wand to do the same. Mummy and Daddy are fighting to make this work a better place for their beautiful boy to grow up in. If we have to kill half these bastards to do so, then that's the way it has to be." She stopped speaking as, even from this distance, the sight of students beginning to make their way from the castle to Hogsmeade was unmistakable. Bella had gotten what she came for. Confirmation this was a Hogsmeade weekend for the students of Hogwarts. Her mate had argued this was something they needed to know. Their master had gone along with that, knowing confirmation would be the signal for their attack. Bella didn't need to see any more. It was time to return and give that signal. It was time to announce they wouldn't just fade quietly away. The war was still on and Bella just couldn't wait to be in the thick of it. Hermione was again surrounded by friends, but in all honesty she just couldn't wait for today to be over. She was finding it hard to enjoy herself, knowing that warriors and auras were putting their lives on the line specifically so they could visit Hogsmeade. She may understand the thinking behind this, but that didn't mean she had to like it. The fact that Harry was one of those lives might have played a large part in forming that opinion, though. All around the village the tension was visible on the faces of their protectors. The threat of attack today was a very real one. Most of the third years stuck together, going for a safety in numbers approach. Those who could speak Goblin clearly heard the shout that went up. "Warriors to me, warriors to me." Even those who couldn't understand what was being shouted recognized who was doing the shouting: Harry. Ones were drawn as their peaceful afternoon in Hogsmeade appeared to be about to come to an abrupt end. With Andrew on duty in Hogsmeade, Director Bones having cancelled all aura leave this weekend, Deborah had taken Danielle to visit Diagon Alley. The Dugan girls were having a witch's day out, something the young mother knew she would enjoy more as her daughter got older. Still, Danielle was enjoying herself at the moment. What 4-year-old doesn't like ice cream? And Fortescue's was simply the best. Their enjoyment, though, was soon ruined by the arrival of 3 figures dressed in black portkey directly into the alley. Deborah certainly got a good look at a pregnant Bellatrix Lestrange as she cast a curse directly at her and Danielle. Time seemed to slow as the curse sped toward them. It was with mounting horror the mother began to realize she wouldn't be able to reach across the table in time to push Danielle to safety. That horror changed to amazement as the curse impacted on wards. Florian himself came rushing out and started ushering his customers inside. "I have goblin wards protecting my shop. Get inside where you won't be seen." Hearing this, as Florian was shouting to those occupying the few tables he had outside his shop, people who'd been on the street raced toward the ice cream parlor while trying to dodge spells from a now enraged Lestrange. Voldemort had opened with some heavy magic, his intention being to cause structural damage while his 2 servants killed everyone they could get their wands on. His first spell blasted apart the front of the apothecary, while his second started an inferno inside. The Owl Emporium suffered the same fate. but Madame Malkins absorbed his first curse. Those blasted goblin wards were interfering with his plans again. With Flourish and Bots, quality Quidditch supplies and even the ice cream parlor protected, this severely dented their ambitions. Not only were these buildings able to resist his attacks, they were providing safe havens for those originally caught out on the street. The snarls coming from Bella were those of frustration. Yes, she'd killed, but these people weren't supposed to be able to escape from her wand. As a witch on fire ran from the Owl Emporium, a cutting curse severed one of her legs clean off while hacking deeply into her other. Let her lie on the cobbles and burn. This was more like it. Bella scanned the alley, eagerly looking for her next victim. Her mate was covering the other side of the alley. Augustus was being restricted to a few kills in the initial panic. That was before people realized there were oases of life-saving safety dotted along the alley. He knew it wouldn't be long before that initial panic passed and they started facing resistance. With them out in the open too, they would have no other option but to then retreat. This was not how this raid was supposed to go. Their supposed carnage was looking more and more like a few buildings being destroyed, with the death toll being kept to single figures. Voldemort was not happy. As a squad of goblin warriors charged down the steps of Gringotts, he unleashed a powerful curse right into the center of their formation, blowing a large hole in their line as warriors flew through the air like skittles. Here were the targets she craved, targets Bella was more than happy to accept as a gift. As her master knocked them down, she would kill the beasts as they hit the ground. Bella only managed one spell though before she was suddenly having to defend for their very lives. Deborah was observing the scene unfold from the door of the ice cream parlor, watching as those brave goblins were blasted like that, saw something deep inside her snap. Only the bravery of another goblin saw her and Danielle survive a previous Death Eater attack inside the ministry. She couldn't just stand here and watch as they were slaughtered. Her wand was in her hand and a curse fired before Deborah had time to think about it. This became the signal for those sheltering behind goblin wards in premises dotted along the alley to do the same. Curses were soon raining down on the trio of attackers. A group of 8 Auroras raced from the leaky cauldron to join the fight, but when Centurion Crow led another squad of warriors in a charge down the steps of Gringotts, the 3 knew it was past time to return to their lighthouse. They didn't even manage a farewell volley of curses, as all 3 were now having to concentrate on defending themselves. Voldemort barely had time to cast Morgue before being forced to flee. There was no cheering as the trio was left with no option but to retreat with their tails between their legs. Diagon Alley was engulfed in flames and smoke, with the cries of terrified animals coming from the Owl Emporium adding a terrible soundtrack to what was already a horrific scene. The still burning body lying in front of the destroyed building was now silent in death. Witches and wizards were emerging from the protected establishments to help fight the burning buildings dotted in between their protected havens, while the auras were checking those who had been hit by spells. There were bodies lying unmoving up and down the alley. The warriors were ferrying their injured back inside Gringotts when floods of people began arriving in the alley. Tonks had seen Harry collect a squad of warriors and disappear. She had immediately raced for the nearest flue. They had communication procedures set up and emergency aid on standby. Hearing that it was actually Diagon Alley that had been attacked, saw her grab a dozen auras and direct them into the flue. She also set off the signal to order the evacuation of the students back to the castle, only to then find Hermione right by her side. Rather than argue, both followed the auras through the flue to the leaky cauldron. Amelia had also arrived in the alley, only to be halted by the carnage that she faced. Pushing her horror aside, she began to get the situation under control. The healer teams that arrived directly behind her helped restore that control as the injured now had somewhere to go. Harry offered the bank as a triage area, an offer Amelia quickly accepted. The extra wands though soon made light work of the remaining burning buildings. If you were to take a photograph of Diagon Alley at that particular moment, a better endorsement of goblin wards would be hard to imagine. Burned-out shells were side by side with buildings that had suffered no damage whatsoever and had also protected their staff and customers. Harry eventually spotted Hermione with another 2 people they both knew. He quickly made his way over there. Danielle was sitting on Hermione's knee and saw Harry first. Her yell of greeting alerted her mother and Hermione. "Harry, you were all golden." Harry activated his armor for the curious little witch. If she was paying attention to that, then she wouldn't be looking outside. Yes, all centurions can do that. The little witch looked to her mother for help. "Is that the same as Daddy? Both fight the bad wizards and witches?" "Yes, love, both fight the bad wizards and witches." "It's nice to see you again, Harry. Apart from the circumstances. That bitch. Lestrange fired a curse right at us, but your people saved the Dugan girls again. Those wards of yours saved a lot of lives today, including ours." Florian himself came forward to thank Harry for the nation's wards. There were those among us who thought these wards were a waste of gold, even with Gringotts offering businesses the chance to pay for them over a 10-year period. Without those wards, we would be looking at a disaster today. They saved many lives as well as livelihoods. Mulpepper has spent decades building up his apothecary. He probably went up in flames with it today. Can you imagine the impact if they'd hit Ollivanders? These business owners were short-sighted and foolish in their choices. No blame can be attached to Gringotts for their failings. Quite the opposite. Florian Fortescue was a well-liked and influential figure on Diagon Alley. His opinion carried weight. That there were people in his shop who survived purely because of his foresight in having those wards installed certainly added to that influence. Deborah lifted Danielle off Hermione, allowing the two teens to hug. "I'm assuming Father sent the recall signal." "Yes. As soon as the first set of wards were attacked, he realized what was happening. We had a squad of warriors on standby in case they were needed in Hogsmeade. They charged out of Gringotts and straight at Voldemort. They took heavy casualties. By the time I got here, the attack was all but over. Voldemort and his pair of Death Eaters must have had port keys." "How did you get here?" "I flewed along with Tonks. She sent the evacuation warning before flewing to the Leaky Cauldron. Once I saw you were fine, I tried to stay out of the way and let you do your job. I just couldn't sit in Hogwarts and not know that you were okay. I'll head into Gringotts and wait in the apartment for you." Barchoke had been looking for his son. He was surprised to find his daughter there too. Hermione was greeting her father as she normally would, but little Danielle wanted in on the act too. She well remembered the little man who had saved her and Mummy on her birthday. Those watching smiled as the child hugged this goblin. Harry, though, had something to add. "Father, that is now twice Danielle has been involved in this war. Can we help keep her safe?" "It shall be done by next week, son." "Sorry, Deborah, I don't think we'll be able to do it any sooner than that. I would imagine today will see us really busy for the foreseeable future." This confused the witch until a smiling Hermione explained, "There will be these same wards on your house shortly. We could never afford them on Andrew's salary, and these two would never forgive themselves if something happened to Danielle. She doubled the number of witches there are in this country who will hug a goblin, even if she didn't know what a goblin was." Deborah just added herself to that growing list as she hugged both Barchoke and Harry. The others in the shop who were waiting to give statements to the Auras had of course heard every word. This saw Florian offering his hand to Barchoke in thanks, both for the wards on his shop and what he'd just witnessed. The pair of Auras present knew exactly who Deborah and Danielle were. They had been front page of the Prophet after all. They were delighted for Andrew and his family, and they too shook Barchoke's hand in thanks. With the rest of the customers then following suit, it was a touching moment for the Goblin ambassador, made all the more so by the fact his son and daughter were by his side to witness it. Ragnarok was surveying the public side of Gringotts with mixed emotions. That their warriors had charged the Dark Lord filled him with pride. He took almost as much pride from watching Centurion Crow charge right through the bank to get into the battle, his warriors pushing themselves to their limits to stay at their Centurion's side. That the Dark One and his two minions had fled from this threat shot a surge of enormous pride right through every goblin inside Gringotts. There was also a sense of achievement here, as well as history being made right in front of them. Witches, wizards, and goblins were lying on cots, spread along the bank's floor. While that in itself was an achievement, that they were being treated in an order purely determined by the extent of their injuries, was history being made right there. His overwhelming emotion, though, was anger. an emotion that was fueled every time his glance caught the two child-shaped bundles covered by sheets. That these bastards could target children meant they were already the walking dead. If Gringotts got their hands on them first, their dragons would feast on their supposed pure blood. He was approached by Bones and Fudge, the circumstances seeing protocols and titles forgotten today. We have 12 murdered, including 9 witches and 2 young children. These bastards have now shown their true colors. They are nothing but killers. They didn't care about the purity of their victims' blood. Witch, wizard, or child made no difference to them either. We have 3 warriors dead and another 2 fighting to see the sunrise tomorrow. Minister, if we get them first, they will face goblin justice. Cornelius had of course read the Lady Black's book. He knew exactly how to answer that. Director Ragnarok, should these murdering bastards find themselves facing goblin justice, I would lead my people in raising a glass in thanks to our friends in the nation. Should we be the ones who find ourselves in the position of having to administer justice, you have my personal guarantee they will all die. It may not be by dragon, but they will still be dead. Both leaders were happy with that. These 3 criminals could not be allowed to live. Emilia certainly agreed with that opinion, but knew they had still to catch them first. We need to show how indiscriminate this attack was. Destroying sympathy to the cause they supposedly champion is also a battle we need to win. Some of the shops in the alley having your wards is the only thing that stopped this being a total disaster. We could have been left looking at over 100 dead and the destruction of the alley. We have to think his next move would be to try something similar in Hogsmeade. Gringotts would be happy to extend the same terms to those premises as we did to our neighbors in Diagon Alley. They were given the option to pay for their wards over a 10-year term, with only 1% interest being charged. We were going to extend this offer anyway. We have completed our surveys and recognized a tract of land between the post office and the 3 broomsticks as an ideal position for our new Hogsmeade branch. Knowing that the goblins would now be welcomed with open arms in the village, Cornelius promised to help make that happen as quickly as possible. The students were escorted back inside the Hogwarts wards as quickly as possible. Parati, Padma, and Neville all raced toward the waiting Augusta for news. Most of their friends were hot on their heels. Voldemort attacked, but not where everyone thought he would. He hit Diagon Alley. Barchoke flukeled to tell me they retreated just as Harry arrived. He didn't want you worrying. Where's Hermione? 1 second she was beside us, then she wasn't. Barchoke must have sent their emergency signal to Harry. He would have used his portkey to take those warriors into Gringotts. Hermione will have gone to Harry. If he's safe, then so will she be. Padma's certainty saw relief wash over Neville. He'd been worried about their best friends. There was also relief in knowing that neither the Longbottoms or Petils were within 1,000 miles of Diagon Alley. The 4 parents had joined Dan and Emma to spend a peaceful week on the island. There wasn't much peace to be found on the Flannan Isle that was home to the lighthouse and its uninvited guests. It was one of those guests that was responsible for all the noise. Bella's bloodlust had been satisfied for now, while Augustus was just too knackered to care at the moment. He'd thrown a lot of magic about in that attack, a lot of magic for him it wasn't the wards, or even the failure to achieve what they set out to do that was responsible for the Dark Lord's verbal outburst. It was something far more serious than that. They dared to lift their wands against me. They actually fired curses at Lord Voldemort. If they have made their choice, then we will just have to make them pay for that choice. Our next attack has to be bigger, bolder, and strike fear into their hearts. If we need to bring the entire country to its knees before they will respect us again, then so be it. Rookwood was just too exhausted to think how his master was going to accomplish that with only the 3 of them. It would be too very soon, as Bella's pregnancy advanced to the stage where she could no longer take part in any raids. With their son due in May, they were already quickly approaching the time where it would become too dangerous. He would once more have to tread the delicate line of offering advice rather than criticizing his master. Augustus knew exactly what had their master so hot under the collar. It was the lack of respect. Not so long ago, the British magical community was so afraid of him they wouldn't even say his name. Today, those very same people stood and fired curses at him. It really was hard to believe that things had changed so much in such a short space of time. They had no influence, intelligence, supporters, or wealth. All they had left was fear. To lose that too was the final straw. This might actually work in his favor, though. They needed something big, something requiring months of meticulous planning. If Augustus could stretch those months out until his son was born, then the little tyke might just have a chance. Augustus Rookwood was a very clever wizard. He could see their only chance was to withdraw from Britain and spend a few years in a more sympathetic country, gaining followers to take back that which they had held once before. He also knew their master's pride would never allow that to happen. This time last year, he had lain in his dank cell in agony from his escape efforts. It was not a pleasant time. What a difference a year made. Having a son with Bellatrix Lestrange as a willing partner was way beyond any of those wildest dreams that had provided the fortitude to continue his painful efforts to escape. He would certainly give his life to try and protect his mate and son. To do so while knowing their son was safe on this island, Augustus would regard as a great victory, especially from someone sentenced to spend the rest of his life in Azkaban. Bella's devotion would never see her abandon their master, just like he would never abandon his mate and the mother of their child. Since that night in her cell, Augustus had been totally hers. He had also started treating every day as if it might be his last. It was beginning to look like that might soon be the case. His entire focus would now switch to ensuring their son survived, considering the last thing he'd focused on had seen both of them do the impossible and escape from Azkaban. Augustus was sure he would be able to come up with something. Emilia was racking her brain to come up with something, anything. We thought of keying the magical detectors to the word Voldemort, but the only two people in the country now afraid to say his name are Rookwood and Lestrange. We can cycle it through the unforgivables, but that also means waiting until they attack again. We've checked all the Death Eater homes and every location those Death Eaters who handed themselves in have told us about. Not a sign of them. They literally could be anywhere. Neither Cornelius nor Amos had anything to add to that. An idea was floated about offering a huge reward for information, but Emilia thought that would hinder more than it would help. If anyone knew anything, I'm pretty sure they would tell us. Even the rest of the Death Eaters want Voldemort dealt with. Offering a reward would see my auras run ragged as people began reporting anything and everything in the hope of striking it rich. We need to prevent a recurrence of what happened today. If we can't find them, then denying Voldemort targets is our next best option. The minister agreed with his chief warlock. Any remaining businesses in Diagon Alley that don't have goblin wards soon will have. I spoke to Ragnarok about issuing plaques to those businesses that did, so that their customers could shop with confidence. He said they had that idea initially but held back because they felt like they were forcing the other shops to purchase their wards. After today, I told him I would make it a ministerial decree if he wanted. That's the route we're going to take. These wards now come with a goblin-made plaque that businesses must display to reassure their customers of their safety. Gringotts opening in Hogsmeade is also something I want to see happening as soon as possible. Twice now the goblins have stood beside us and fought this enemy. It's time for us to stand by them in this matter and help protect our own people at the same time. Emilia couldn't see any arguments being raised against any of that. The people of Hogsmeade had welcomed the goblin warriors with open arms. She couldn't see the bank proposal being any different. That there would soon be safe havens from Death Eater attacks in the village would also be a great boon for villagers and the visiting Hogwarts students too. Amos also didn't think they would have any trouble getting this through the Wizengamot, the words of Augusta Longbottom coming back to him. She had said at the initial discussion of goblins being able to live outside Gringotts that she would welcome goblin neighbors. Augusta wouldn't be alone in that now. Not only would their wards offer refuge to their neighbors, their warriors would soon appear if those same wards were under attack. While certainly not his intention, the chief warlock couldn't help but find it ironic that Voldemort's attack had actually helped push wizard-goblin relations closer than they had been for centuries. The story of little Danielle Dugan hugging Ambassador Barchoke was also spreading like wildfire, as was that goblin family's response to the 4-year-old witch. Anora's family would soon find themselves safe from the threat of Voldemort. He wondered if this would start a new trend, one where parents would teach their children to hug goblins rather than to fear them. Amos was struggling to believe their society could have come so far in such a short space of time. It shouldn't really be so hard to believe though, since most of it was derived from self-interest. The Ministry's closer alliance with the Goblin Nation was making their country a safer place. Now who could argue that was not something to be desired? Harry was trying not to argue with his father, but wanted some answers. One in particular. Did you know Bellatrix Lestrange was pregnant? After having contacted Hogwarts and discovering Sunday's proposed visit to Hogsmeade had been cancelled, Harry and Hermione were staying in Gringotts overnight. The couple were now sitting having a discussion with their father, a father who was having to confess his sins. Yes, I knew. I also deliberately didn't tell you in case you held back, if forced to face her. She certainly didn't hold back today. She accounted for almost half of those murdered in the alley. That witch is a ruthless killer and needs to be treated as such. Any opponent making concessions because she's pregnant is going to find themselves dead. Hermione tried to intervene, knowing any argument between these two could be bad. Both had a streak of stubbornness running right through them like the lettering in a stick of seaside rock. I agree with you, Father, that Lestrange is very dangerous and can't be allowed any concessions. I can't agree with the decision not to tell Harry. If Lestrange was visibly pregnant, not knowing beforehand was much more likely to cause Harry to hesitate than being prepared for the situation. Oh, it was visible, Hermione. She's at least as far on as Henrika. We've also learned that taking a witch or wizard's wand away leaves them practically defenseless. I've heard Lestrange fancies herself with a knife in her hand, but do you honestly think she could beat a goblin in any fight with a blade? I'm sorry, son. It was my decision. And it was the wrong one. You withheld information from a centurion in what is practically a time of war. Surely you must see how serious that is. I tried to protect my son and forgot he was also a centurion. I apologize. I thought that by the time her pregnancy was visible, Lestrange would not be taking part in any attacks. By our reckoning, her baby is due in 3 months. Yet she was in the alley today and throwing dark magic around without a care to her unborn child. It would appear she's even crazier than we feared. Trying to move the argument off topic, Hermione asked their father a question. Can that really affect the child she's carrying? We goblins class dark magic as anything that blackens the soul. The killing and torture curses certainly fall under that category. A baby is said to be born with a pure soul. That same baby, though, is part of their mother's body until the birth. It's not just nutrients they can absorb while in the womb. Any child of Rookwood and Lestrange is going to have a hard enough time of it without their mother dragging them along to battles too. Hermione had this terrifying image in her head of Lestrange going into battle with her baby strapped like a post on her back. You don't think she'd really take her child into battle, do you? This led to her father shrugging his shoulders. Hermione, that witch is crazy enough for anything. Both goblins in the room knew exactly what Hermione had done, and both were quite prepared to let her. Neither father nor son wanted to fight over this. A mistake had been made and wouldn't be repeated. It was time to move on. Harry and Hermione were fighting. They didn't need ward stones today since they were using their swords. Their run in the tunnels was now greeted with waves and shouts of recognition. Their swordplay too was attracting a lot of attention. Their concentration was total though. It wasn't until they finished that both realized just how big their audience was, or just who was amongst those spectators. What do you think, Master Sharpshard? Acceptable? Better than that, Director. Miss Granger not only has a fine teacher, she wields that blade as if born to it. The Centurion here would appear to have taken at least some of my teachings on board. The only way to improve is practice, practice, and more practice. Something these two have obviously done a lot of. The couple were both bowing, embarrassed at the praise. Harry, though, couldn't resist firing a friendly barb at the Master of the Blade. Director Ragnarok, you should attend Master Sharpshard's classes. I think those are the first kind words I've ever heard him utter. His students would certainly appreciate your presence if that is the effect you have on him. This had the director and most of those listening roaring with laughter. I see even Miss Granger's company hasn't been able to part you from that streak of insolence you are so fond of. Forgive me, Master Sharpshard, my mate told me that was his goblin sense of humor. Is this not the case? Hermione was looking at Harry mock accusingly as she said this. The laughter actually increased in volume this time before Harry could answer. Hermione, Master Sharpshard doesn't have a sense of humor, goblin or otherwise. Destroying my favorite axe, Centurion, is not a case for laughter. At least it now has a good home. Yes, it hangs on my wall. Harry couldn't hold it any longer and burst into laughter himself. Master Sharpshard was only a second behind, leaving Hermione to wonder if she would ever get a handle on their mysterious sense of humor. The four walked back to their apartment together, further enhancing the couple's reputation in the nation. We were looking for you earlier, but your father told us you would be training. Master Sharpshard wanted to see that, and I tagged along. The thought of the director just tagging along only made sense if he wanted something. Both Harry and Hermione were just about to find out what that was. In times of trouble, it is always a bonus if you can give the nation something to look forward to. With your help, I'm hoping we can achieve that. Reports coming back from those living in King Usse are glowing, making me wonder if we couldn't give more goblins a taste of your wonderful hospitality. I am proposing we hold a summer fair in King Usse. Harry only remembered one fair in his time at Gringotts. His memories of this event were some of the best of his turbulent childhood. Director, I think that's a wonderful idea. King Usse is certainly available for holding this event. All I would ask is that the timing not coincide with me becoming a godfather or brother. I'm sure we could arrange the dates with your father. I just wanted to ask your permission to hold it in King Usse first. A fair inside Gringotts is always limited by the space available. Holding it in your glen easily solves that problem. We could even let it run for an entire weekend. With Harry readily agreeing to that, Ragnarok had one last thing to add. Of course, any of your friends from Hogwarts would be more than welcome to attend. After all, it is your home. As the group parted ways, it was an excited Harry who explained to Hermione exactly what was involved in a goblin fair. Hermione was again reminded of the goblin children playing in the snow and realized at once why holding this event outside would be such a big event for the nation, one they would all be looking forward to. She could also see more goblin dwellings soon being built in King Usse, something she was very happy about. Happy was not a word Rita would use to describe her feelings about her latest exclusive on the front page of the Prophet. While it pleased her on a professional level as a piece of work, as a witch it made her feel sick. Rita had been inside Gringotts when the alarms had been sounded. She had transformed into her bug form and flew from the bank. Rita had immediately gained height to avoid all the curses that were being thrown. It also gave her an excellent view of the battle. The picture taken from her memory and now displayed on the front page of the Prophet was testament to that. The view from above showed the end of the attack. The trio of murderers were taking spells from the protected premises while goblin warriors and auras were now attacking from either end of the alley. The arrival of Centurion Crow with more warrior reinforcements saw the trio forced to flee for their lives. The dark mark above the alley was actually being obscured by the smoke from the burning building. Viewing the scene from this angle also meant that the bodies lying in the alley weren't recognizable as anything other than bodies. Death and destruction in Diagon. A normal Saturday in Diagon Alley became a day that will live with infamy in the psyche of everyone who has ever visited that famous street. Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort, Bellatrix Lestrange and Augustus Rookwood portkeyed into the middle of the alley and immediately began dispensing death and destruction. In the past, this group have championed unsupported beliefs that would see one section of our society elevated above everyone else. Yesterday they showed their true colors, murdering indiscriminately and without the slightest warning. Neither the purity of blood nor the gender of their victims made the slightest difference to this trio. There were even 2 children amongst the 12 murdered for simply being in the alley. That the death toll and destruction wasn't on a far greater scale is due to a number of factors. Chief amongst these was certain shopkeepers having the foresight to take advantage of the generous provisions. Gringotts offered businesses and had their premises warded against Death Eaters. Not only did this protect their businesses and customers from this ambush, they provided safe locations for those in the alley to seek shelter from the vicious murderers. Even although the bulk of Aurors and Goblin warriors were busy patrolling Hogsmeade to protect the Hogwarts students, both the Ministry and Gringotts were still able to rapidly respond to this attack. 4 brave Goblin warriors lost their lives charging down the steps of Gringotts to engage the murderers. When the witches and wizards, already in the alley, opened fire on the terrible trio, they were forced to scurry away and hide as more reinforcements flooded into Diagon. In the space of 5 horrific minutes, Diagon Alley was in flames, and 16 souls had been murdered. A disgusted yet forthright Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, had this to say: "The Ministry and Gringotts are determined these criminals shall be brought to justice. Whether that is wizarding or goblin justice will depend on who gets to them first. Either way, these 3 criminals will pay with their lives for their despicable actions here today." While we continue to search the length and breadth of the country in an attempt to discover what rock they crawled under, we are currently working with our goblin friends and looking to introduce measures to prevent an attack like this ever happening again. Wherever these 3 are hiding, they better hope it's the Aurors who catch them first. Goblin justice would see them being thrown unarmed into a Gringotts dragon pit. After witnessing the atrocities these 3 were responsible for in Diagon Alley, who could argue against that fate being fully justified?